The Benicia City Council is called to order. We're usually very punctual, but this is a workshop, so I guess we can have a little latitude. We're going to convene our open session with a roll call.
Council members Campbell.
Here.
Hughes. Schwartzman.
Here.
Strawbridge. And Mayor Patterson.
Here. And can Councilmember Schwartzman lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance, please?
My pleasure. Please join me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America
and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. There's a part of this desk that protrudes, and I try really, really hard not to hit it with my knees, and I just didn't do that just a moment ago, and that really hurt. A plaque stating the fundamental rights of each member of the public is posted at the entrance to this meeting room per section 4.04.030 of the City of Benicia's Open Government Ordinance. In addition to that, we would like to note that those of you who might need some special assistance in order to participate in the meeting could talk to staff tonight, and we'll see if we can add some hearing capacity. And also, if we turn the fans on, sometimes that's distracting, and just quietly let staff know, and we'll make an adjustments. And then in the future, we can actually be better prepared to meet your needs and accommodate them if you call 746-4211, about 48 hours in advance. Adoption of the agenda. Mr. Kilger.
No changes. Move to approve. Second.
Call the roll, please.
Council members Campbell.
Yes.
Schwartzman.
Yes.
And Mayor Patterson.
Yes. All right. This portion of the meeting is the public comment time, and this is an opportunity for you to comment on anything that's not on the agenda. And generally, we'd like to have it somewhere within the realm of our jurisdiction as a city. That doesn't seem to stop a lot of people. And then we do have a time limit of 5 minutes, so we ask that you keep your remarks to 5 minutes. We're really interested in what you have to say, and so if you haven't submitted a card, don't worry about that. Just stand up when I finish reading some of the instructions here. We do ask that speakers not make personal attack on council members, staff, or members of the public, or make comments which are slanderous or which may invade an individual's personal privacy. Also, in addition to the public comment, we have written comments that are received after the packet has been posted or sent out, and I'm going to read those, and all of that is available on the side table over here. And we have been kind of in an ad hoc way posting these because they're very informative. They're usually a PowerPoint or something or a chart. So we're going to try to get something where it isn't just random, and if it makes sense and all of that, but we need to work that out with staff. So I have been saying to you that they would be posted, and our clerk has been doing that, and so we realized that we needed to have an actual process. So tonight there are 7 handouts, and the first is Community Choice Aggregation PowerPoint presentation. The second is Community... Yes, ma'am. When I finish reading what's on the table, then public comment. Community Choice Aggregation, a Regulatory Perspective PowerPoint presentation. Number 3 is California ISO, a brief introduction PowerPoint presentation. Number 4 is Benicia Community Choice Aggregation Study Session PowerPoint presentation. Number 5 is PG&E Overview PowerPoint presentation. Number 6 is Marin Clean Energy PowerPoint presentation. And number 7 is letter from Adams, Broadwell, Joseph, and Cardozo regarding CEQA. So I have no cards for, or actually, I guess I do have a, let's see, what do I have? I have, Brian, is this a card for public comment? Yes. Okay. So you have a card, so come forward, please. Thanks.
I just want to speak on something that will be coming before you, which is the crude by rail project. And I'm not sure I can come on the night that it's going to be before the Planning Commission, but I know it's coming to you after that. So I just want to speak in favor of that. That discussion has broadened to include all sorts of things that don't really are not germane to what's before the Planning Commission, which is, can they build an unloading track in their refinery within the limits of the Planning Commission rules and CEQA? The discussion's gone way far away from that. So I just want to point out a couple things. The refinery is not asking for any change in their allowable throughput, that is barrels per day. They couldn't do that through you anyway, so it doesn't change that. It does, if permitted, save a lot of airborne particulate, which is what everybody's been talking about for the last 20 years. How can we get cleaner air? This actually accomplishes that. It does accomplish it in the shipping part, not in the production part, but a reduction is a reduction. It also, if allowed, helps maintain jobs in the city, both employees and subcontractors who work for the refinery. There's about 800 to 1,000 people in that category that it helps maintain those jobs. It also helps maintain the revenue stream to the city from the refinery and its suppliers, who all pay taxes and fees and whatever. Over 50% of the city revenue comes from those business and industrial sources. And lastly, it's not an increase in pollution. It's a decrease in pollution. For 20 years, we've all been talking about how to make the air cleaner. This is something that does it. Isn't that a benefit to the community? So, in closing, I just think that overall the thing is good for the economic health of the community, and it's good for the air. Thank you.
Thank you, Brian. As you know, state law does not allow us to discuss that. And actually, my heart leaped with joy when I saw you checking I'm in favor, and I thought you were in favor of community choice aggregation. But thank you for your comments. All right, so we have public comment. Anybody that hasn't submitted a card may step forward now.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Just to highlight a report released today from the United Nations and the World Meteorological Organization, indicating that in 2013, the parts per million of CO2 have risen dramatically to 396. And there's a group called 350.org hoping to hold our parts of carbon in the air to 350, and we're now at 396, and we've reached from Mauna Kea Observatory some days as high as 400. The other bit of information that I just took from the news tonight on public television was that they're seeing dramatic, there's a report from Washington, D.C. on the state of the birds. And there's been a dramatic decrease in bird populations throughout the United States, particularly the Southwest, and in Hawaii particularly. Almost half the species there are facing extinction. Just something to note as we talk about this important topic tonight.
Thank you. Are there any questions of Ms. Butel?
Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Anybody else wishing to address the council on any item that's not on the agenda tonight?
Good evening, Council. Ed Russell, 2980 Bayshore Road. I'm here to talk about the arsenal cleanup issue. It's been, or it had been, a standing item before this Council. I didn't see it on the agenda tonight, and I did want to keep that in our thoughts. I did attend and have been a longstanding member of this committee's subcommittee task force on the arsenal cleanup. Things have changed dramatically since there has been orders issued by the State Department of Toxic Substance Control, and now we're dealing with specific cleanup issues. As we go down there, as the city has to pursue participation in that mandatory cleanup now ordered by the state, it appears that it's becoming more difficult communications, as lawyers are brought in, environmentalists, specialists for the individual parties. And I just wanted to let you know that I'm still here as an individual property owner in affected property that has been identified by the state to be potentially contaminated and needing cleaning up. And if the city is going to go to any state or federal legislators in order to put pressure on the Army Corps of Engineers to participate in this cleanup, that overriding concern has to be not just 2 parcels, but the entire arsenal. So I would just, again, I'd like to let you know that that I'm here to represent my interests and the interests of other businesses in the industrial park, and thank you for doing all the work you're doing there, and I hope it goes well.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Russell. First, I think it's not on the agenda because this is more like a workshop. It's not a, even though it's said it's a regular, do we call it a workshop? Special meeting.
Special meeting, I understand,
okay.
yes.
So that's the reason. And then secondly, really do appreciate your contribution. You're like a walking Wikipedia. So it's been very valuable. So thank you very much.
Appreciate it.
Anybody else wishing to address the council
A question.
on? Yes, Vice Mayor Campbell.
I just had a question for you, Ed. You know, you're north of 780, aren't you, with your place?
We are, yes, north of 780.
Okay, because I was thinking, you know, maybe the city attorney can clear it up for me. I thought the only places we had left were down in the arsenal, down by like Tyler and Adams Street and those areas. Is there something out there that they're still looking at?
So the orders that we received are in the lower arsenal, as you mentioned, but they're, you know, the whole arsenal as a whole has been taken off the EnviroStore list, but there are potential for other issues
You might.
depending on the individual
Do you mind
properties.
elaborating on what would happen if you wanted to get a building permit and what process you would go through?
Is that outside?
I don't know. That's why actually asking the city attorney. I don't want to have a discussion, but it is a piece of information.
Well, let's put it on the next agenda.
All right.
Okay, because I was thinking, you know, we had like 200 sites or something like that, and 196 of them I thought were clean. You know, that was over and we were done, and then just the sites down in the lower arsenal were all that's left.
We'll have that clarification at the next meeting. So
Can I make a comment?
it's worth back. No, actually, no, because we can't have a discussion on this. It's a public comment, and we're sort of straying away from the intention of not having a comment. So we'll have it on the next agenda, and if you want to communicate with the city attorney prior to that item, then go ahead, and other items that can be covered.
Okay, but if the city attorney could get back to me on that, just kind of clear that up for me there.
All right, anybody else wishing to address the council on any item that's not on the agenda? All right, we will now go into the business item of the evening, which is the community choice aggregations, and it's a study session, meaning that there is no decision that's going to be made tonight. There will be plenty of discussion and questions asked to give some general direction of additional information that might be useful. We want you to be able to comment, so we'll, of course, take time to hear your comments and questions as well. Try to have a little less formal aspect about it. We would prefer to be in a less formal setting, but right now, in order for us to have this broadcast and have the rest of the community have access to the discussion, we continue to have something like this in these more austere chambers. But I am trying to indicate to you that this is to be a more casual, it's not a council meeting per se. So, having set that up, I would have Mr. Kilger cover the bases that need to be covered for the rest of the presentation.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm going to turn that over to staff and introduce them in just a second. You covered the main thing I wanted to say before we proceed, which is, again, Council requested an information meeting. Staff has done their best to try to provide a diversity of opinions on this matter. I will say up front, it turned out to be a lot more difficult than we had anticipated. Being able to do that. So I don't think people should anticipate a debate tonight. You're going to get information and people's opinions on the issue, very knowledgeable people, but again, it strictly is information. Again, thank you. No decision tonight. We'll not be requesting it. It is a study session. If there's information the council's interested, we will obviously take that in and see what staff may be able to respond with. At this time, I'd like to introduce, because it's the first chance that we've had to introduce him, is our interim Community Development Director, Mr. Dan Marks, across from me here. And he will make the initial presentation and turn it over to Alex.
So welcome, Mr. Marks. I want the public to know how honored I feel that we are, since I've known you for a very long time, and your reputation is excellent. And I have been in meetings with you as an observer, and we're really very fortunate to have you. So thank you very much.
Microphone, please.
Yes, you can explain about Mark, although I've never known anybody who's been able to do that, but you're welcome to explain about Mark.
Sorry, I was making myself a note about the arsenal, and I forgot that I should have pushed my button earlier. Councilmember Mark Hughes is not here for this item.
That Mark. Okay.
Yes. Oh, sorry, yes.
Yeah, go ahead and repeat that, please.
Councilmember Mark Hughes is not here tonight because we were researching the conflict of interest question that sort of came up at the last meeting. Part of the question is very easy. Somebody had suggested that he had a conflict of interest because of his child's employment with PG&E. And of course, an adult child that's not dependent on the parent is not typically the cause for a conflict of interest. Neither is his pension that he receives from PG&E, since that's a defined benefit pension. But he does have some stock. And it seems to us so far that because of the size of PG&E, it's probably not a conflict of interest, but out of an abundance of caution, while we do a little bit more research and to avoid any perception of influencing the proceedings, he's chosen to abstain tonight. So we'll continue our research, and hopefully the FPPC will actually respond substantively to our question.
All right, thanks for that information. Any questions of council?
Excuse me, Mayor.
Yes, Mr. Kilger.
If it's not inappropriate, I don't know if Councilmember Strawbridge's absence was mentioned. In fairness, this meeting, staff worked very hard to try to find a date where we could get all 5 council members, the mayor and the council members together, and within 2 months, and it turned out impossible except for regular dates. So Councilmember Strawbridge and I thought we had informed the whole council, did indicate that go ahead and proceed without her, but she would then review the tape. So that's the reason for her absence. Thank you for letting me state that.
Thanks. Any other clarifications? All right, thank you, Mr. Marks.
So, again, thank you, Mayor and members of the council. It's a pleasure to be here tonight, especially tonight, because I think we're in for a remarkably informative discussion about community choice aggregation, or CCA.
Is your mic on?
I think so. Yeah, it is. Is that better? 'Cause
Much better.
All right. Maybe you can turn it up. That's good. And maybe the first question is, who came up with this name? CCA, Community Choice Aggregation. It's kind of a meaningless set of 3 words that I never understood very well, or where it came from. And perhaps our first task tonight is to tell you what community choice aggregation is, and to tell the public that. I'm sure many of the council members already know, but it is an odd set of words, and we will first describe what it is. And fortunately tonight we have a great group of experts, beginning with our esteemed Climate Action Plan Coordinator, Alex Portashaver, to talk about what CCA is, and to talk about not only what CCA is, but the context for CCA, how we get our energy. And many of our speakers are about that. How do we get energy to place the CCA conversation in context? CCA, fundamentally, is about communities banding together to provide energy choices, and especially energy from renewable sources. Considering, as the city manager said, considering whether the City of Benicia would like to be part of a CCA, or a community choice aggregator, and in particular, we're looking at Marin Clean Energy, which is an aggregator, or MCE, is a strategy in our climate action plan. It is something that we decided we would look at as part of our climate action plan implementation. And so that's why we're here. That is the why we're here. We're here to talk about something that we said we would look at. We have several experts to talk about this, some of whom have traveled from pretty far away. And so I'd like to thank them up front for putting out their time, being here today, volunteering their time, and coming from some distance to help us think about CCA and to place it in context. The process staff is recommending for this evening is that the panelists make their presentations, beginning with Ms. Portashaver, followed by questions from the council, and then questions and comments from the public. If that's acceptable to the council, that is how we will proceed. And all of our presenters will be presenting from the podium. We didn't think we could fit them around here. Maybe later on we can have them sit up here with us, but didn't know we could do that. So right now they're sitting in the audience and they'll be coming up to the podium. With that, unless there's questions, I will turn it over.
I think we might have some questions. Councilmember
I
Schwartzman?
just wanted to clarify the format. So are you suggesting that Alex will begin in
Microphone, please.
suggesting that everybody go through everything and all the questions be left for the end?
Yes.
Versus after each presentation questions?
Yes, that is
The
what we're
first part.
recommending, because we suspect that many of the questions you may have
Will be answered.
will be answered during the presentation and may not be answered to the end, the last presentation, since they all come with a slightly different level of expertise from different areas. So that's why we're suggesting that. Thank you, Councilmember.
All right.
Any other questions? Then I'll turn it over to Alex.
I don't see any questions. Any questions, clarification from the audience? All right, no questions, clarification. So, Ms. Portashawer.
I'm just going to give Dan Marks a couple seconds to open the lens so I can use a PowerPoint to present some information to you tonight. I wanted to reiterate both Dan and the city manager's remarks. I'm really, really appreciative of all of the panelists who have come here to speak about community choice aggregation tonight. It's obviously a really important session. We hope to provide a lot of information to the public and to the City Council and provide an opportunity for everybody to ask the questions that they have about CCA. So, tonight, as has been mentioned before, you will hear from a panel of experts that has been assembled to help members of the City Council and the public better understand community choice aggregation, which I'll refer to now as CCA. The panel consists of individuals who support CCA and individuals who are neutral on the issue. I'm now going to introduce the panelists in the order they'll present this evening. Each of them will have approximately 5 minutes to discuss CCA. At the conclusion of the presentations, we will then address the council's questions like Dan suggested, and then the public's. So our first panelist is Will McGuire. He is a regulatory analyst with the California Public Utilities Commission in their energy division. In his role, he conducts compliance reviews of community choice aggregators, implementation plans, and statements of intent. He works closely with CCAs, utility companies, and the CPUC's legal division to facilitate successful implementation of CCA programs and resolve disputes. Prior to his work at the CPUC, he worked as an analyst at a private U.S. Customs brokerage house. He has a bachelor's degree in communication arts and has a JD from Hamline University. Our next panelist is Tom Delaney. He's currently the Vice President and Executive Managing Director in the Energy Division at Southern California Telephone and Energy. He has over 20 years of direct energy and transmission sector market experience. Prior to his position, he served as Senior Account Manager and Board Member at the California Independent System Operator, or ISO, for 5 years, where he worked on market design, regulatory and grid operation issues with a special focus on the needs of owners, banks, energy marketers, cities, counties, and municipalities. He has 2 master's certificates in governmental and commercial contracts, and he's also a licensed California attorney. The next panelist is Sefra Ninau. She is the Regulatory Affairs Manager for the California Center for Sustainable Energy. She facilitates all of the center's policy-related activities, which include identifying and fulfilling the center's regulatory and legislative needs. She works closely with the CPUC and the California Energy Commission, and she's also a licensed California attorney. Our next panelist is Joe Horak. He is currently a supervisor in the Energy Solutions and Service Division at PG&E. Before this role, he served as a Senior Customer Relationship Manager. Prior to joining PG&E, he was a Manager of Corporate and Government Relations for the Sonoma County Tourism Bureau and also served as a Project Manager for the Sonoma County Economic Development Board. He has a Bachelor's in Journalism and a Master's of Public Administration from Sonoma State University. Our last panelist is Dawn Weiss. She is the Executive Officer for Marin Clean Energy. She coordinated efforts to launch MCE, the first CCA program in California. She has close to 20 years of experience developing cutting-edge renewable energy and energy efficiency programs for public agencies. Previously, she was a principal with the County of Marin, where she managed energy and sustainability initiatives and served as the executive director for Sustainable North Bay. Now I'm going to move on and provide a brief introduction of CCA, like Dan mentioned, and then I'll turn it over to our expert panelists. Oops. There we go. So first, I wanted to create a bit of a framework for tonight's discussion, and Dan Marks actually mentioned some of this already, but the city adopted a climate action plan in 2009, and this plan is a comprehensive document, and it contains over 100 strategies that are aimed at reducing greenhouse gas emissions. And one of those strategies includes suggesting that the city consider assessing the feasibility of joining a CCA, and in this case, Marin Clean Energy. In 2012, Sonoma State University was hired to assist the city to implement the plan. And earlier this year, I came before the council with a work plan. That work plan was approved, and it included a strategy that focused on assessing whether or not we could join a CCA. So, what is CCA? This is a question that we're going to address throughout the evening. I'm going to provide a brief definition now, and I'll leave it to the other panelists to elaborate on that. CCAs allow cities to work with third-party agencies to procure or develop renewable electricity. What is renewable electricity? It's actually defined by the California Public Utilities Commission, and it includes biomass and biowaste, geothermal, hydroelectric, solar, and wind. Just to the right on the slide, you'll see just a brief diagram, and it indicates kind of how CCA works, and we'll show it again on the next slide. First, a CCA procures the renewable electricity. PG&E or any other utility company maintains the transmission lines and distributes the power to customers, and PG&E or any other utility continues to provide the billing and customer service. This is actually just a visual representation of what I just explained, but you'll see that a CCA buys or builds renewable electricity. It's delivered by the utility company who maintains the transmission lines and continues to bill customers, and then the renewable electricity arrives at a home or business. So, more renewable electricity for Benicia. Tonight you're going to hear about renewable electricity and how potentially joining Marin Clean Energy could lead to increased renewable electricity in this community. So it is important to note that right now, Marin Clean Energy is the only existing CCA that Benicia could join. Currently, they're conducting a technical study which will assess the ability of MCE to serve the city's electricity demand while maintaining its rates for existing customers and reducing greenhouse gas emissions. It will also assess some of the potential financial impacts to different customer sectors in Benicia. So I'm wrapping up here, and before I turn it over to our panelists, I wanted to make a quick note kind of about where we started and where we're going. So as mentioned before, in June, the City Council allocated funds for a Marin Clean Energy technical study. The results of that study are expected to be available in the next week or so. So you'll see up here that in October, staff plans to come back to the City Council with the results of that study and an analysis and a recommendation for official action. Then, if the City and the City Council does opt to join Marin Clean Energy, the enrollment process would begin, which includes an opt-out process for those not wanting to participate, and you'll hear a lot more about that later tonight. I also wanted to mention that Benicia is not the only community assessing whether or not it should join Marin Clean Energy. There are a number of others, even very close to Benicia, that are doing the same. As of last Thursday's Marin Clean Energy Board meeting, Napa County, which includes the unincorporated areas, has officially joined Marin Clean Energy as its newest member community, and Napa's enrollment in MCE is anticipated for February of 2015. El Cerrito, our neighbor, has formally requested consideration as a member community similar to what we've done here, and has authorized Marin Clean Energy to conduct a technical study as well. Finally, Marin Clean Energy has already completed a technical study for San Pablo, and on August 4th, the City Council actually unanimously voted to join MCE on the first reading of the required ordinance. The second and final reading of the ordinance before they become an official member is scheduled for next Monday, the 15th. So that's it for my formal presentation. And at this point, unless there are questions for me, I'll turn it over to our first panelist, Will McGuire.
Right, well, let's have clarifying questions if there are any. Vice Mayor Campbell?
Yeah, this just a question I was sort of curious if you could explain a little bit more. There's not a direct power line from Marin County to Benicia, and so you say, you know, what we're doing is we're now going to use renewable energy in Benicia if we go along with this. Could you kind of explain that a little bit more? That's not quite right as far as I can see, because it's not like there's little green electrons coming out of Marin County going straight through the power grid of Northern California to Benicia. At least the way I understand what we're doing is, you know, we're paying Marin County to produce more renewable energy going into the grid, so there's a higher percentage of renewable energy going into the Northern California grid. And the part which was being bought by Benicia that say was coming out of fossil fuel or out of coal generating electrical plant will be slightly less. So what we're doing really is we're changing a little bit toward renewable electricity, a little bit more of it going into the Northern California grid in general. But we aren't really getting straight from Marin County any electricity, right?
That is a great question, and if it is all right with Vice Mayor Campbell, I might defer that to one of our many experts who I know will answer that specific question. And if it's not answered, then I'm happy to circle back and provide an additional explanation.
Okay, I can wait.
Right, it's a regulatory answer, so that's what we're waiting for, is the person with the knowledge about the regulation. All right. Any other questions? Any questions from the public? And this is just for clarification, not discussion, terminology. Okay, let's go on with the panel. And the first one is William McGuire. Is that correct?
That's right. Good evening, Mayor and council members. Are you getting a clicker for me? Okay, I've got a clicker coming. So my name is Will McGuire. I'm a regulatory analyst in the energy division at the CPUC in San Francisco.
California Public Utility Commission.
That's right. Thank you, Mayor. California
Welcome.
Public Utilities Commission. And I work on these CCA matters, among other people as well, but I am one of the main analysts who looks at them on the ground. So I wanted to thank you for letting me come and talk about it a little bit. I wanted to say right off the bat, of course, the CPUC is not here endorsing one position or another. We're just here to give you some facts. That's what Alex asked me to come do, so I'm going to try to do that. To add on to the definition of what a CCA is, this one I believe I may have pulled off Wikipedia, but I think it's pretty good. It talks about CCAs as a system adopted in a number of states which allows cities and counties to aggregate the buying power of individual customers within their jurisdiction in order to secure alternative energy supply contracts on a community-wide basis. And they can have any number of goals. They often are to have more local control over your utility service and often to get more renewable energy, as we've talked about here. Customers not wanting to participate in this program can always opt out. That's a key aspect of the CCA program as it exists in every state so far. This is a little chart that shows kind of what Alex was talking about before, and it starts to answer the question that the Vice Mayor asked. I believe it just shows kind of who's responsible for what under these different scenarios. So IOU is kind of the status quo of what we have now. You've got Marin Clean Energy's.
So IOU is investor-owned utility?
Yep, that's right. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Need to spell out those acronyms. We definitely live in Acronymville over at the Public Utilities Commission. So you can see the main difference from the investor-owned utility and the CCA model is that Marin Clean Energy is purchasing the power, whereas PG&E is purchasing the power. Still, though, PG&E is maintaining the transmission lines and providing customer service. So no matter what source the generation is coming from, it's still coming on over those PG&E transmission lines, whether it's made in Marin, whether it's made in Sacramento or wherever it's made. PG&E is still maintaining the transmission lines and collecting a charge for the transmission and distribution. I don't know if that helps answer your question, but I think we'll probably get there before all the presentations are done. And then just another possibility you can see is the municipal public utility, where the municipal, like Sacramento, takes care of all those functions. Very quick history, I won't bore you too much, but this was authorized in 2001 by Assembly bill, expanded later on in SB 790 by Senator Leno. And in that bill, he required the CPUC to create a code of conduct that the investor-owned utilities are meant to abide by. And the result of that was CPUC decision 12-12036. And among other things in that decision, we require we make certain limitations on the marketing and lobbying that IOUs, investor-owned utilities, can employ against CCAs. We prohibit discrimination against CCAs customers or the tying of benefits to maintaining bundled service. And in addition, it requires a biannual audit of investor-owned utility compliance with that CCA code of conduct. And we intend to start that audit next year as it's required. But overall, the CPUC has a fairly light regulatory touch when it comes to CCAs. We permit CCAs to enroll new customers unless they opt out, as I mentioned. And we do require the CCAs to register with us and meet certain benchmarks that I've made in a big slide you can't read right here, it seems. But to summarize, they have to tell us about the organizational structure, the rate setting structure, disclosure and due process in setting rates, a number of other things, including a description of the third parties who are going to be providing the electricity. And these are things we look for at the CPUC and kind of do our due diligence and make sure that it looks like it's set up for success before we set them out into the world to kind of fend for yourselves in some respects. But the CPUC does still maintain a partnership with you. As Dawn can probably tell you, we work very closely with the CPUCs and the IOUs to make sure everything runs smoothly. We kind of act as a resource and a source of information for you. In addition, there's a few other things that the CCA is required to provide. That's universal access, reliability, equitable treatment of all classes of customers, and other requirements established by state law or the commission. After the implementation plan is approved, the CCA will then, I guess I'm realizing now that Marin Clean Energy has probably already taken care of most of these steps that we're kind of going through tonight, but this is sort of the CCA from the ground up, so I can kind of skip through a few of these, but as they're not as relevant, so save you all some time. So just a little bit more on the CPUC's role. We do have to, we're obliged to proactively expedite any complaints against an investor-owned utility by a CCA. We're pretty fortunate so far. We've got a pretty good utility and we've got some pretty good CCAs, so we haven't had any formal complaints at this time. There are still kind of informal things that come through, and we work to keep the peace sometimes and act as a little bit of a referee from time to time and to informally mediate those disputes. And happy to say my partners on both sides, it's always gone fairly well. So just to wrap up, I mean, we're here to help you guys. We're a source for information and can sometimes settle a dispute if need be informally. And just put my contact information up there, and I think I did. Yeah. There's my email and phone number.
Hey, let's leave that up for a little bit
Sure.
so people can write that down.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Mr. McGuire.
Yeah,
and then what we're going to do is follow staff's direction and save our questions.
Sure.
So everyone write their questions down. And Vice Mayor Campbell, that's what I want to respect is staff's request. So our next panelist. Is this Mr. Delaney?
Yes.
Okay, so if you can go either side of the podium so we can see you.
Sure. I'll go over here. The microphone is. Thanks.
Well, Mr. Delaney, we had a wonderful introduction about your background, so. All right.
Thank you. I'll try to keep this brief because I think the real meat of the evening is the questions, which I'm happy to be here to do. So my name's Tom Delaney. I've had a long history with California ISO. I was on the board originally. I came back years later to help them implement a market redesign, a technology upgrade that was quite important to the ISO, if not California.
So why don't you say what the ISO stands for?
I'm sorry. ISO stands for Independent System Operator. In essence, what that means is before, the three utilities would control the decision access making rules to the transmission grid. And back before 1998, they passed legislation that convinced the IOUs to give up control of a transmission system to a new independent system operator that had no generation, had no other interests in the stake except to make sure that the wholesale high voltage freeway was open to all. You know, the analogy being if GM owned all the freeways, you'd probably not see many Fords or Hondas on their freeways. So the California ISO is that independent system operator of most of the grid of California, except for a small few Swiss holes in it. This slide just explains me, but this one explains the role of the California ISO itself. As I was saying, traditionally utilities are vertically integrated. They have their own assets. The investor-owned utilities are subject to FERC and the CPUC.
FERC is?
Federal Energy Regulatory Commission. I'm sorry, I'll try to not leave the alphabet soup. Just soak. But the ISO, the Independent System Operator, is charged with not only the safety of the system, but making sure that there's access to it, that it's equal, and we kind of, in essence, manage the electrons on the superhighway there. It acts as an impartial grid operator, as I mentioned. It has no interest. We have no generation. So it's not like the saying is we don't have a dog in the race. We're independent. And we make sure that there's diverse resources out there because the networks and the markets demand them. The ISO offers pretty much a full network model to where we give access to the system, and once you're in the system, you have access to the entire state, subject to some congestion fees and other things. So you submit schedules, and we do our best a day in advance to help balance the real time, take care of the bottlenecks, and make sure that you're on the freeway. We have a forward market. I can get into that later. But basically, it's an electric bid-ask system, just like a commodity. And we use a very granular pricing with nodes. So Benicia would be a node. You would have your own price. So would Marin. So next slide. So how does energy flow? In essence, every time you throw on a switch, all these lights here come from someplace. It comes pretty much from competitive generation for the most part. And the ISO is the one that delivers it. So every time you throw on a switch, you complete a circuit that goes from here through a subsystem to the wholesale, to the high voltage system, to generators, to the control area that takes care of it. And the flows just don't flow from a generator directly here. They flow from other transmission lines. You have to kind of see it like it's a lake, and it fills up equally. So once your generator's in the system, we don't color code the electrons. It's in the system, but we meter it and we call it yours. It's kind of like color coding. We call it kind of contract path system. But this diagram will explain how the system works. I can go into greater detail. Next slide. This is the interesting part. I kind of like, I guess, having a little fun with. There are a lot of different balancing authorities across America. There's 38 in the West, and the 11 western states, which also includes British Columbia and the Baja Peninsula of Mexico. California is by far the biggest market, by far the biggest balancing authority. We have most of the grid. Again, we have some Swiss cheese there. That looks like Los Angeles. It looks like Sacramento, and it looks like another irrigation district in the southern hemisphere on the Yuma border. Next slide. This is the bigger picture. So you have all these different larger entities, and you can see in the west here in the green, that's called WEC. It's the Western Energy Council, Reliability Council. And again, it has 38 balancing authorities in the west there, again, California being one of them. So I thought I'd throw a slide in there that showed the enormity of this. And California is the big dog in the west. Next slide. I mentioned a control area. This is important. We have one in Folsom. We have one in Alhambra. What does the control area do? Well, this is how we balance the system, and it's based on frequency. 60 hertz, that's why your clocks, we balance your clocks, right? So what we do is we have frequency out there, and when the system needs more, we're connected to generators that in real time will ramp up, and when the lights go down, we don't need as much, it goes down. But this kind of a control area here is the heartbeat. It's the nerve center of the electrons throughout the state. Very impressive place. I suggest you go there someday and have a tour. You'd be very rewarded by it. Next slide. This is another big function that we do is grid planning. Again, we're more of a coordinator with this. A lot of the work still happens at some length with the investor-owned utilities, but the whole idea there needs to be a center organization that, again, has no dog in the race, that dictates what we think is fair and not biased, because someone's going to have to pay for the upgrades, and we want to make sure that everybody has a shot at this. So that's another large function that we account for as well. Next slide. I won't go into this because it takes a while. I'm happy to talk to anybody about this. It's in the slides itself. But this is how our market works. You can see there's a pre-market. It's 7 days out. But on day ahead, you submit your bids, and by 10 o'clock, the system shuts off, and we take your bids and we put them into a large bucket and stir, and we have a very smart algorithm that looks at it and decides who gets what and who gets what charges. And again, the next part, we operate it in real time, balance the system, and after the market, you get a bill. So that's the simple short of it. I'm happy to take questions. Next slide. Oh, these are some terminologies that I can get into later, but there is a difference between a watt and a megawatt. You'll hear us often talk about capacity, which is different than energy. And then frequency, I talked about that. Market participants would be you folks if you decided to go in that direction. And you would work through a scheduling coordinator that would have a desk that we would interact with on a 7x24 basis. And again, I'm happy to talk at greater length or detail about these things afterwards.
Okay, so what we're going to do is that staff had recommended that we hold our questions until the whole panel has spoken, so stand by, and I do have a couple of questions. All right, our next panelist, I've lost track, I think it was Sefra?
Yeah, our next panelist is Sefra Nanau. I just wanted to mention too, and I forgot to it during my presentation, there is a handout on the table with the rest of the meeting materials. It's titled Key Terms, and it has definitions for some of the terms that you've been hearing tonight, and I wanted to make sure that everybody had that so they could better understand the presentations.
So, Ms. Nanan, is that correct in the pronunciation? Good.
Thank you. So I just wanted to thank you for the opportunity to present to you this evening. My name is Sefra Nanau. I'm with the Center for Sustainable Energy. We're formerly known as the California Center for Sustainable Energy. We recently dropped the California from our name to recognize a broader focus for our organization going forward. Just to give you a little bit of background, we are a nonprofit organization. We're dedicated to accelerating the transition to a sustainable world powered by clean energy. In furtherance of our mission, we work to reduce barriers for renewable energy and distributed generation, as well as energy efficiency and clean transportation. And given our mission, we of course favor alternative structures that would encourage greater use of clean energy sources. And we view CCAs as an important tool for achieving a clean energy future. So I wanted to start with just kind of giving a brief overview of the policy landscape that we face in California for CCAs. The state has many policy goals. We have a statewide commitment to clean energy. And some of these goals include, of course, greenhouse gas emission reductions, GHG emission reductions, our state RPS goals.
RPS stands for
Renewable Portfolio Standard. So most importantly, the one coming up would be the goal to achieve 33% renewables procurement by 2020. In addition, we have goals for local pollution reduction, energy security and resiliency, and then our state has a loading order which prioritizes energy efficiency, demand response, procurement from renewable sources, above any type of traditional procurement of fossil fuel sources. These goals all end up at least partially the responsibility of local jurisdictions to achieve through their local climate action plans. And CCAs are an obvious way to meet these goals and frameworks, working with the regulated utilities. So the next couple of slides that I'm going to present to you will be going over, first of all, the benefits of CCAs, and then second, we'll kind of go over some of the general risks of CCAs. So first of all, benefits of CCAs. The first one is that it plays an important role in introducing customer choice. So CCAs offer an alternative to remaining with the regulated utility. CCAs can choose who provides their energy generation and what provides their energy generation. CCAs can choose based on price as well as source of generation, and it tends to open up the market and increase competition. Number two, CCAs stimulate investments in clean distributed energy resources, DER for short, which are part of the state's preferred resources. Oftentimes, the primary reason for many communities' interest in forming a CCA is to increase their procurement of renewables within that community. Third, the CCAs can move more nimbly and use innovative approaches to distributed energy resources. Decisions are often made locally, and they can partner with an energy service provider that provides a specific portfolio of distributed energy resources, or they can procure that DER themselves. Fourth, of course, is to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. Many communities have a GHG emissions reduction goal, and CCAs can help to meet that goal by increasing the local consumption of renewable energy. And the fifth is that CCAs can provide cost savings and economic development. So again, as I mentioned before, CCAs introduce customer choice. This helps to open up energy markets, leading to greater competition, which it can in turn provide cost savings. In addition, CCAs can finance energy projects, allowing them to avoid the wholesale market, which buffers them from market fluctuations. And then this rate stability is great for retaining existing businesses within the community, and then also attracting new businesses to the community. And lastly, CCAs can also develop their own local generation projects, and that can help to increase local employment. So of course, on the other side, there are some general risks. First and foremost, liability and responsibility to supply safe, reliable power will rest with the CCA. Of course, this is of utmost importance. We definitely want the supply to remain safe, and we definitely want it to be reliable. Customers definitely want that power to be there when they want and need it. But we've seen both Marin Clean Energy and Sonoma have demonstrated that this is technically and economically feasible, so we view this as a manageable risk. Number two, costs and concerns to utilities are definitely real. The utilities continue to provide some services, including all metering, billing, collection, and customer service to CCA participants. So they will incur those costs. But we view this, the benefits of CCAs far outweigh these costs and concerns, and we like to recognize that the utilities won't go away. They can coexist with the CCAs. And the last, of course, is regulatory risks. Most decisions about CCAs have already been made by the CPUC, California Public Utilities Commission, but future decisions could definitely change that landscape. CPUC commissioners change. You know, we've just have a new commissioner come on board. The commission president, his term expires very soon, so it's very possible that that landscape could change. So continued participation in CPUC proceedings will be necessary in order to protect the interests of the CCA. And the process is complex, does require some navigation, so it may be required to have some staff who specifically focus on regulatory affairs. And that's it for me. My contact information is up there as well if you have other questions.
All right, thank you very much. Well, consistent, we'll get back to you with questions. I have a couple. All right, our next presenter is Joe Horak. Mr. Horak?
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here, and staff has called me an expert and gave me a remote control, so I couldn't be happier. So, Mayor Patterson, members of the City Council, again, thank you for inviting me to be here and provide some information about PG&E. As was stated earlier, I want to let you know that PG&E always abides and follows the code of conduct. Tonight, I'll be just centering my remarks on PG&E with Dawn coming up next. I believe she'll be able to answer and illuminate anything that you may have on CCA issues and anything like that. So without further ado, I'll move into it. One of the things we want to emphasize tonight as we go forward is that you have choices. You can buy power from PG&E. You can buy power from another provider, and you can generate your own. And regardless of what area or what choice you make, PG&E will continue to deliver the power that you need. We'll continue to maintain the electrical infrastructure and respond to outages. And PG&E continues to send your bill. As an overview of PG&E, and I'll get through these, so we have about 20,000 employees. We distribute energy to about 1.5 million electric customers and about 4 million gas customers, and our service territory is about 70,000 miles, square miles, I should say. Let me give you a little information about PG in the North Bay, and if you look at the wishbone there, the North Bay for us includes Benicia and Vallejo and Napa and Marin counties. We have about 430 employees there. In 2003, we've spent about $240 million with about 120 local businesses and paid $7.5 million in taxes and $4.5 million in local franchise fees. We maintain about over 3,800 power lines and over 2,000 miles of natural gas pipeline, and we're continuing to make those investments as we move forward. We also invest heavily in energy efficiency program, as was brought up earlier about loading orders. In the North Bay, over the last few years, we've saved about 23,000 megawatts of electricity and 33.5 million therms and paid 5.4 million in incentives. And we look at that as taking about 6,000 cars off the road. So we'll continue to do that, and we think that's a great benefit to communities. In the community, we've about 400 volunteer hours, and between our charitable contributions and our employee contributions, over $500,000 back into the community by our contributions. So with that said, let's talk about our energy mix. As you see in 2013, and I will say the PG&E 2013s are preliminary, we won't have the final audited numbers back until October 1st. So these should be considered preliminary until we get the final blessing from the CPUC and verification. As you can see in the U.S., obviously a load of coal is the primary area in which they get their energy. If you look at PG&E, we are about, right now, obviously 22% renewable, and with large hydro, 11% and 22% nuclear, which gives us about 55% carbon-free energy. In 2013, that's how we look, just a repeat of what we did. But if we look at the 2020 and where we're heading, you can see by state mandate, we're going to have to be at a 33% renewable factor. Right now, it looks like in 2014, we're about 27% on the renewables, so we're well on our way. And of course, those have to be audited, and with the drought and impacts and small hydros, that may change and go back and forth, but we won't know that till basically this time next year. And with that, it's gaining on about 64% carbon-free when we take into next year. Where have we come from in the last few years? This slide sort of gives an idea of where we were back in 2002 when we had 11% of total bundled retail sales. You can see where we were with renewables. In 2013, as I said, we're 23%, and obviously in the projection, we're at 33% going forward, and out of that, 45% looks like we're going to be in with solar. Now, that does not count rooftops, and it doesn't count our proposed community solar project that's coming up, but that's what we have contracts looking like. The next one I refer to as sort of the measles shot. As you can see there, 80% of our renewable contracts are within the state of California. And you have them both from bioenergy, geothermal, small hydro, solar PV, solar thermal, wind, and a small amount of wave energy for, right now, 156 contracts with this. How we benchmark, this is where we're benchmarking right now with our emissions of delivered energy. As you can see, the U.S. average is over 1,200 pounds of CO2 per megawatt hour. The state of California average is around 611, and we're now getting into dropping it down this past year to 445. Quickly, we'll talk a little bit about our solar overview. We have a strong track record on solar, and we continue to support our customers who want to go solar. 25% of all of the solar installations, rooftop installations, are in the PG&E service territory. Our year-over-year growth since 2009 has been 34%, so we're seeing a huge increase in solar installations. 7 of the top largest solar projects are in PG&E service territory. So you can see there, as you see the graph go up the side, we're seeing way back in 2001 there was very small amount of solar, and as we cumulatively approach 2013, you can see the dramatic increase in solar renewable energy in California and in PG&E. My next slide is talking a little bit about in the North Bay, and as I said, it's cumulative of Napa and Marin and Vallejo and here in Benicia. we're seeing about just over 5,000 solar installations and a capacity of about 5 megawatts right now. Hopefully that will continue to grow significantly as we go forward. My next slide is talking about what we look for in the future. This is proposed in front of the California Public Utilities Commission. It's our Green Option, which is a voluntary program that will enable all PG&E bundled electric customers to purchase up to 100% of their electricity from PG&E procured solar projects within PG&E service territories. Now, customers, the proposal calls for customers to go with 2 ways to participate. You can either draw from a pool of larger projects from a half a megawatt up to 20 megawatts, or you can draw from a smaller project within 10 miles of your home that's anywhere from a half a megawatt to 5 megawatts, or 3 megawatts rather. So that's what we see coming into the future. It's just a proposal in front of the California Public Utilities Commission, and we're hoping to see that very soon. What do we see the benefits of the Green Power program as we're moving forward? Obviously, with all the numbers I've given you about the growth of solar, we see a lot of our customers are looking for those renewable energy options. If you look at providing solar for, it's more of a solar access for all, we realize that about 75% have no direct solar access because they're in apartments or unsuitable roof space, things of that nature. So this program, which is we've budgeted 272 megawatts to this, will allow those customers to take that advantage. Now, I want to quickly touch on this because on this next slide, and I'll do it very quickly, because I think it talks to a lot of things we're talking about today, which is sustainability. It's talking about what we are doing not only in the renewable energy, but in our alternative fuel vehicles and our electric fuel vehicles. It's an important element that we have, and we continue to move more to electric vehicles and more to hybrid functioned vehicles. And I think you see that turn of, especially with fully electric vehicles using renewable energy to go into those fuels and more clean fuel to go into it. And we're trying to take steps just to not only beyond what we're doing, but also into our fleets. Other services we provide, obviously we talk about investing in energy efficiency, help on the bill, access to online information about your information, alternative pricing plans from time of use, and also care and medical baseline information. And a lot of those are available whether you choose PG&E or Marin Clean Energy as we go forward. So thank you very much, and I look forward to answering any questions that you may have as we go forward.
Thank you very much, Mr. Hurek. And our next speaker is Don Weiss.
Thanks very much. Okay, great. Hello, Council, members of the public. It's a pleasure to be here this evening, and I'm going to skip through a few of these slides because I think we've all gotten some of the basics. This is just a map showing where CCA is already in operation in a few other parts of the country. This is showing how the power flows, but I won't belabor that point. I think we've heard that enough. But I will tell you a little bit about MCE to get started. So we formed our agency in 2008. We're a public agency governed by a board of directors with one representative from each of the cities and towns that we represent. We currently have 13 members on our board representing each city and town, as well as one representative from the county of Marin. And as of next week, we're going to have a representative from the county of Napa also sitting on our board. They've gone through the full process of becoming a member. So we're excited about that. We began serving customers in 2010, and we started incrementally initially with about 8,000 customers in 2010 and phased in customers over a couple of year period. Currently, we are serving 125,000 customers, which represents about 75 to 80% of all the customers in our service territory, and this includes all of Marin County and the city of Richmond. we have been able to reduce a significant amount of greenhouse gas emissions. That really goes along with our initial mission. The whole reason that we went to the trouble of forming a CCA program was because we wanted to achieve some significant greenhouse gas reduction targets that had been set in our community and also in the city of Richmond. And we've been able to really exceed the expectations as far as our greenhouse gas reductions. We're also currently saving customers quite a bit as far as the rate comparisons go. And currently this year, the savings for customers is about $5.9 million. Now, we offer 3 energy products to customers. And of course, customers can also continue to receive their generation from PG&E. You can see that as the first option there. The default option for all customers, if they don't make a choice and they're within our service territory, is the light green option. That's 50% renewable, and that comes in at a cost currently that's lower than the PG&E option. Now, we don't make any promises about that. We don't control PG&E's rates. We don't control each other's rates, and so there have been times when their rates are a little higher. Since we launched our program, our rates have always been very competitive, and for the last year or so, we've been providing a significant savings to residential and commercial customers. Then we also have a deep green product, which is the next step up there. That one is 100% renewable. That comes at a 1 cent premium per kilowatt hour. So what that means for an average residential customer is about $5 a month. The final option, and this is an exciting one, we're just now launching it, and we're taking customer sign-ups right now for this MCE Soul Shares program. The Soul Shares option is 100% local solar, and so it's tied to a new solar installation that is in the process of being built right now. It will be fully completed and operational in 2015, and at that time customers that have signed up for this program will be able to take power allocated from that facility, and they will also be able to have a fixed rate, a not to exceed rate for a 20-year period that's tied to the cost that we're paying for the power. So we directly pass that through to customers, and that's an exciting option for folks that can't put solar on their own roof. We have quite a few power sources in our portfolio, and so I'm going to briefly run through a few of them right now. We have contracts with 17 energy suppliers. That totals around 28 power supply contracts right now in our portfolio. More than 177 megawatts of new in-state renewable energy are being constructed for MCE customers right now, and you can see by the little icons where some of those are located. You'll see hydroelectric power, geothermal, that's the little teardrop with red wiggly lines coming off the top of it. That's geothermal we're getting from Calpine. There's quite a bit of solar, as you can see, sprinkled across the state. And we have some wind from the Pacific Northwest in our portfolio currently, but those are through short-term contracts that we'll be phasing out soon as we transition to more in-state renewables. Just last Thursday, we executed a contract for 100 megawatts of wind power from California from a new project that's being built and will be coming online in 2015. It'll be creating a lot of new jobs, both union jobs and local jobs, and we're really excited about that project, which is the biggest power supply purchase we've made to date. Currently, our projects have enough power to serve 85,000 homes per year. And the last thing I should mention is that we're really focusing a lot this year on local solar development projects, and we have quite a few that are in progress right now that I'll talk about towards the end of the presentation briefly. The next thing I wanted to mention is pricing, kind of the rate comparisons here. So I'm going to walk through the residential cost comparison just to make sure it's really clear. As you can see here, there are 4 options being compared for rates. This is for an average residential customer that uses about 500 kilowatt hours a month. That's the average in our service territory right now. You can see for the PG&E product what the total cost is. For the light green product, actually for all the products, you'll see that the delivery charge is exactly the same, and that's because of what we talked about before, that PG&E continues to provide the transmission and delivery services to customers. They continue to charge the customer for that service just as they did before, and there's nothing that changes at all once a CCA begins serving in a community with the delivery charges. The generation charge is what changes. So you can see from one column to the next, there are some different values there under the generation. So the PG&E average charge for this average customer is $46.74 per month. For a light green customer, it's $40.13. For a deep green customer, and this is exciting to see, the cost of generation is actually even a little bit lower than the PG&E rate. And then the MCE local solar rate is quite a bit higher, and you'll see a big premium there that really reflects the cost of building the solar program or the solar project. Keep in mind that that is the fixed price option. So we have 50 customers so far that are really excited about the ability to lock in that cost, and they expect that within the next 20 years that'll be a good price for them. So we're excited that that's an option. The next thing I should mention as you're looking at this slide is the PG&E fees row that is shown just after generation. These are also known as exit fees. So when a CCA begins providing service in a community, PG&E needs to be made whole for any purchases they made on the customer's behalf before they depart from service. And so this is a fee that makes PG&E whole for any power they purchased for you. These fees will show up monthly. It's about $5 to $6 a month. Currently, it does vary over time depending on what the market cost of power is. I can get into that more if you're interested, but that charge does diminish over time, and we're hoping there will be some changes in the future that will help that diminish more quickly and not be as much of a burden for customers. This is a commercial cost comparison, and I won't spend too much time on this because the breakdown is the same, but you can see for a light green customer, there is savings being achieved. We just completed a couple of cost analyses this summer for some of our larger customers, particularly public agencies and schools, and we found that the West Contra Costa Unified School District is saving $64,000 this year by being an MCE customer. The City of Santa Fe is saving $43,000 this year. And there are many other examples of savings that are really helping to benefit the local community, while the customer is getting a greener supply. We also have an energy efficiency program that we launched in 2012. This is funded through the state public purpose charge. That's the same fund that is used for PG&E's energy efficiency program. And we really are able to tailor the energy efficiency program that we offer to the local community. We have a multifamily program that's been very successful, and that's reaching some untapped sectors that haven't yet been reached through existing energy efficiency programs. We also have a small commercial and a residential program that complement what's already offered in the state. And then finally, we've just launched an on-bill repayment program that allows for customers to do deeper retrofits in their homes and businesses and pay for them over time on their energy bill. This is a great way to achieve deeper, longer-term savings that we really want to support in the community. We also offer cash rebates, and that's been useful for a lot of our, particularly our commercial owners of buildings. We have quite a bit of participation in the net energy metering program that is offered in our community and in most of California, actually. We have more than 33 megawatts of installed solar within our service territory, so that's a lot, and we're really excited to see that. I should say that a couple of years ago, our goal was to get to 20 megawatts by 2020, and we saw so much solar installation happen just in the last 4 years that we've already exceeded the goal, and that's really exciting. We offer some generous benefits for customers that have solar on their roof. We allow customers to roll their credits over year. We also allow customers to cash out if they've accrued more than $100 in a year by generating more than they use on site. We will send them a check for the amount that they accrued. And we also allow customers to accumulate credits at the retail rate rather than the wholesale rate. So those are a couple of incentives that we have in place to really try and incentivize as much distributed solar and renewable installation as we can. This is a map showing the local solar development and other renewable development that we have underway. We are in the process of finalizing many of these contracts. The San Rafael contract, I guess it's kind of hard to read from far away, but there's a red dot next to San Rafael there. That installation was complete in 2012. It was our first feed-in tariff installation. It's about 1 megawatt. It was built over a 3-month period, creating about 20 jobs, some which were associated with a pre-apprenticeship program in Marin City, and that was a really exciting partnership there. We used a local developer, a local bank, and a local design firm. So that was a great project. We have a feed-in tariff with 9 more megawatts of capacity on it, and just in the last 4 months, we've received 5 more applications for our feed-in tariff. So many of the sunshines that you see here are feed-in tariff projects that are in the works. In Nevada, we have the Soul Shares project at a quarry site, an old quarry site. That will be the location for our Soul Shares customers. You'll see a biogas flame up there at the top of Nevada. For those of you that are familiar with the area, there is a redwood landfill located up there. They've been flaring methane for many years, and we're excited that they're going to be able to start using that to generate energy for our customers. We're also working with the Port of Richmond to get a 2-megawatt project built there using local labor, and we just executed a lease agreement with Chevron last week to have access to 60 acres of land for solar installations there. And we're going to be able to build a project starting with a 2-megawatt size but growing to 12 megawatts over the 20-year term of the contract. Actually, it's a 25-year term of the contract. So lots of local development is underway. And then we've been able to create quite a few local jobs, not just through our renewable energy installations, but also through our energy efficiency programs. We have about 20 staff. We're a pretty lean shop, very busy, 20 staff. And we also work with a lot of vendors that provide specialized services to us. Our energy efficiency jobs have included contracts with some local nonprofit organizations like Rising Sun Energy Center, Richmond Build, and the Marin City Community Development District. And there's one other slide that I wanted to show here, if you all don't mind. I think this could be an interesting one. And it relates to the question that Councilmember Campbell asked at the beginning of the presentation, which is, how do we know that the electrons, or are the electrons that MCE purchases actually going to Benicia? And of course, the answer is no. And I think, as Mr. Delaney explained really well, the power that we purchase goes onto the grid. And it's really the ISO's job to make sure that the lights stay on and that the electrons go to the place they need to go to keep the lights on. If we were to set up a system that had a renewable facility directly powering this council chambers, we would need a separate line going from that solar facility to the council chambers, and we might end up with a power supply system that looks a little bit like this one, which is in Kathmandu, Nepal. We had a staff member that went there recently and took a picture for us, and we thought, oh, that's a good example of why we don't do that. What we do is we have this really great streamlined grid that the ISO manages beautifully. And you only need one wire. Sometimes it has to be a really big wire, but you just need one. You put the electrons on at one end, and they come out at the other end. I can assure you that there's very careful accounting to make sure that every kilowatt hour that we use, that our customers use, has to be associated with a kilowatt hour that we put onto the grid. So that concludes my presentation, and I'm happy to take any questions now or whenever you like.
Right. If I may suggest the panelists to come up and sit here, and then we can ask the questions. And Mr. Kilger's moved, so I'm not kicking him out, right? Yeah, okay. And then Mr. Delaney, if you want to move up to the center between the podium and the PowerPoint, so be close. And while you get settled, we'll organize our questions. I have a card from one person. I don't see him. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take questions from the council first, and then I will call on Andreas Soto if he comes back. All right, thank you so very much. First of all, I want to thank you for your presentations. It's a lot of information. It's very useful information. And let's start with Vice Mayor Campbell and then Councilmember Schwartzman.
Okay, these couple really pretty basic questions. And one of them is just, supply and demand. I'm figuring that, the power grid, North California power grid, you can't just produce as much electricity as you want if you're a generator, because there's no giant battery out there. There has to be someone buying the electricity, and you produce enough electricity throughout the various sources to match the amount that's required. I think I'm right on that part. So, for example, Marin Electric couldn't, if it wanted to just double the amount of electricity it generated, it couldn't just do that. PG isn't under any sort of requirement to buy it. Am I right on that one, first off?
We need to have the equivalent amount of customer load to match the supply that we purchase.
That's where I was going with this. That's all I need to know on that one. So that's why Benicia comes into play here. If we don't basically say, we want to buy Marin's electricity, and electricity isn't generated to a higher capacity coming out of Marin, then it just doesn't happen, right?
Right.
Yeah.
So we would not procure power for the City of Benicia until after the City of Benicia has chosen to join, and then we would go through a new procurement to serve that particular load.
Okay, got it. The other question I had was in your presentation, annual cash out payment for solar customers. Is that if you have, like I said, solar panels and stuff like that, you get, at the end of the year, there's a true up on how much you produce, and, you get a certain amount back, right?
That is correct, yeah. I think the only difference if you had MCE service is that if you're producing more than you use, we will carry your credits over. If you've produced $100 more than you use, we will send you a check.
Okay, that's all I have.
Vice Mayor
Yes.
Campbell, I'd like to add something to that. Whereas Marin does operate much like Don has mentioned, you are allowed to generate more electricity than you need, put it on the grid, and the ISO will pay you for it. Or another way of doing that is, yes, you can generate more electricity than you need and sell it to another load or load-serving entity that's serving load, and the ISO will make sure it's accounted for. So you absolutely have the right to overbuild resources and sell them to someone else, and the ISO will ship them there.
So can we do a follow-up clarification on that, or did you have a follow-up?
Well, yeah, just a quick follow-up. So, for example, if more energy is produced on the West Coast, then we could sell it, in theory, to like the Midwest or the East Coast or someplace else, is what you're saying there.
Not that far off. It would be pretty much within the West, because the interconnection stops, when you get past Colorado, Wyoming, places like that. But yeah, absolutely. It's one whole system. So California still gets 25% of its energy from out of state, from up north, Bonneville, from east of River, from Arizona, from Four Corners, from Utah. So it's one big system. That's the beautiful thing about this, is that in California before, you would have 3 utilities, and you'd have to pay rates to go through each service territory. So if you wanted cheap hydro from the Pacific Northwest, you'd have to pay PG&E's rate, Edison's rate, and then San Diego's rate just to get it to San Diego. Today we don't do that. We've taken the rates and melded it. It's like a postage stamp rate, to where one price, you get the whole grid. And if there's people wheel through the state, meaning that they'll schedule with us to bring it from, say, Bonneville or Seattle, bring it all the way through to California and sell it to Phoenix, sell it to someone in Arizona. So the market's a lot more robust than just meeting individual footprints.
Okay, but someone has to want it, but, apparently there's always some place in...
there's always a deal to be struck, and whether it be in we also run in essence, a spot market. Our system's based on bid and demand. So people bid in their generation, and demand states how much they're willing to pay, and in some cases no more. And for the other part, too, that you can't miss out on here is we do treat load like it's, in essence, an upside-down generator. For instance, if you're out here on Martinez, you do have some large single loads. And as the load ramps up, we'll have to turn on a generator to facilitate that. In some cases, there are plenty of loads that are willing to displace their needs for an hour or a few hours, and they make money doing that. So a good example is the Budweiser facility. As you're driving on your way to Sacramento, it would not be unlikely for them to just turn off their freezer, and because it'll run fine and it will stay cold for hours. Or a steel mill, a pot, 100 megawatt pot that's been electrified, we can take it offline in 10 minutes and pay them rather than pay the generator. So there's a lot of different ways to be in the marketplace, be it generation or using your load or your demand as if it was a upside down generator is what I call it.
That leads me to a question to ask you. Are there any limitations on the amount of coal that can be used in California for energy? Is there a regulatory restriction?
I'd probably, it would best that the CPUC representative answer that, but I do know that there's a lot of federal pressure throughout the United States, in fact, the world now. The World Bank's not going to finance coal projects anymore. So there's just a lot of pressure on coal to either clean up or go away. There's a lot of coal used in the West. A good example is up in Utah, and they're having to move away from coal to natural gas and other resources too. I'm not exactly familiar with the coal requirements in California, but I don't believe we have coal plants.
So, Mr. McGuire, wasn't there something in the Warren Alquist Energy Conservation and Development Act that said you couldn't have more than 10% coal as a source of energy?
I honestly don't know. Maybe someone else on the panel has an insight on that. We'd be happy to get back to you.
That would be good. I think it starts with Government Code 25,000. I'm just curious, and the reason I say that is because I think the regulatory aspect about what California can do and cannot do is really important. And I think the idea of building new power plants ought to be thought about when you are constructing the scenario for renewable energy. So I just think that regulatory framework that's been around for 40 years plays a really major factor in some of the decisions that the state's making now. Is that a fair statement?
Yeah, I think so. I think from PG&E's slide, I thought it was 0% coal on PG&E. Is that right?
I guess it's on. Can it?
If the light's on?
The light's on, I can talk.
Right.
Okay, great. Thank you. From our perspective, we're responding to the market need, and obviously the market is pushing for cleaner electricity. As we start working to our RPS standard and moving forward with over 33% that we're shooting for, and GHG free, obviously coal is not part of that.
Okay. Councilmember Schwartzman?
So back to the building more generation. So would it be fair to say, though, it is pretty much dependent on supply and demand, and so to the extent that the demand is there, it would make sense for utilities or CCAs or whatever to develop more power and to build more. And conversely, at some point, the supply and demand could get to a point where it doesn't make sense economically to build a project. So, I think that's probably pretty general in nature.
True. And it depends where you build the facility as well, because, in some places there's a lot of supply and there's not a lot of what we call congestion, meaning it's hard to get it there. Congestion like on a freeway or anything else, it's not hard to get it there. So they have more than enough supply. In some places, it's really hard getting the megawatts there, so you either need to beef up the transmission system to get it in, or people do is they build a facility on that side, on the weak side, to make sure that they meet the load. And there is always a certain level where supply equals demand. You don't build any more. But one of the benefits as a CCA is that almost equal to that of a municipality. And some of that looks like the cost structure. If you're an investor-owned utility, you have to use debt and equity. And because of that, naturally, their cost of capital is 18 to 25% higher just out of the gate. Because if you're a municipality, you can use 100% debt financing. You don't have shareholders to feed, and you don't have other things that go along with being a for-profit entity like profit. And so your public purpose would be different. Your cost of capital would be different. You start off with an economic advantage being a CCA versus an investor-owned utility just by showing up. A good example is this: is a lot of the existing municipalities in the state of California, whether it's the Northern California Power Authority and the people under that umbrella, or in the Southern Hemisphere, or as Don has just shown today, the purpose is a little bit different, so the cost structure comes out better.
Okay, so, and going over to Donna, I think I heard you say, as a response to a question, that that you just don't go out and build stuff. Unless you've got orders for it, okay, you're not going to go out and build.
Right, and Mr. Delaney is correct that we could do that, of course. But there would be some risks associated with that, and it doesn't align with our core mission, which is really to get more renewable energy onto the grid for our particular customers. So if we built more than we needed, we would have to sell that in the market. We would need to either have fixed contracts for that, or we would be selling it on the day ahead or the spot market, and the prices could go up or down depending on the time of the year. So since that's not really our core function, we try to tie our purchases to our load. That said, there are always some variations every month, and so we do pay imbalance charges to the ISO depending on if we tend to schedule a little more than we need every day so that we aren't short, and then if we buy more than is needed, then we get a credit back on the ISO invoice. So a little bit of that happens around the edges, but it's not the focus of our agency.
Okay, so I've got a question that's going to tie to that later, but back to the supply and demand. So let's just say CCA just takes off. So wouldn't that then put a lot more power into the system, or potential electrons in the system, which could drive costs down overall?
I believe I understand the nature of your question, so let me see if I can provide an answer. If not, stop me, please. Again, back to your question of supply and demand, and if new resources are built, what happens to the existing resources, I think, is the core of your question. Well, they get displaced. It doesn't mean that they necessarily go away. Today, California, we have to plan our transmission system for the worst possible peak, the worst possible minute or hour out of the year. And because of that, we do keep around a lot of extra resources that maybe we only run for a couple of weeks. I once did an analysis on this to where we kept as much as $1 billion worth of assets around that, in some cases, are waste. It would be better if we didn't have to do that, but we keep that around because it gets hot here. And sometimes we don't get all the energy we need from the Northwest or from Arizona or other places, so we have to turn to ourselves in state. But to the extent that you want a different array of resources, you want a different set of resources, much like Marin has done, all you're really doing is putting your resources in the grid, and you're displacing the other ones. It doesn't mean they go away. A lot of these resources still have capacity contracts, which gives them a fixed amount of money every year to not be mothballed. So they're there. They're not really going to go away. The question is, which ones do you want to run? That's a choice you get to make by building your own resources or choosing a provider that brings those resources to you.
Okay.
I want to do a follow-up on the supply and demand. So what is the role of the California Energy Commission?
In my humble opinion, they do a lot of research, which is great. They're very forward-thinking and progressive. I like a lot of the studies that they do, but a lot of their work has to do with permitting.
And at one time, it seems like they had a role in terms of the demand. There was a period where power was being generated and people were being encouraged to use more power. That got changed, and then there were some more changes, and I haven't kept track with it. So do we have an underlying regulatory framework that says you just can't go out and demand? There has to be some kind of conservation aspect to it?
The California ISO will meet the demand, period. So we don't get into that regulatory aspect. It was kind of inferred earlier that if you went down the road of being a CCA, the onus is on you to supplying your own power, which is true. That's where you have a provider come in and do that. But at the end of the day, electricity flows to where it has to be. It flows to load. And so it's not like your lights are going to go off. You will be served. We will serve you. The issue is price. And the issue is what resources do you want? And that's a policy decision on your part. As far as how much you can consume, we do have alerts that ask people to consume because we may not have enough electricity in certain pockets, like San Francisco or parts of San Diego. So we ask people to watch that carefully because either those are parts of the system that can go down if supply doesn't meet demand in real time, and there have been problems at times to where we've had to displace load.
Okay, Councilmember Schwartzman?
Donna, this is going to be a number of questions for you. So you were talking about the MCE Sol shares, and it's 100% local solar and fixed rates and so on. Is that in a local geographical area? So in other words, let's say Benicia wanted to have an MCE Sol shares. Are you saying or suggesting that you could build a plant or a solar system, solar whatever it is here, okay, to serve the local community, and that's kind of what you're talking about?
Yes, although to clarify, what we call it our service territory. So our service territory includes all the cities and towns that are members of our service territory. And so the Sol Shares program is available to anyone in our service territory, and it has to come from a power supply source within our service territory. So it's not city specific.
Okay.
We treat all ratepayers really the same within our territory.
Okay. Next one is on the PG&E fees. You mentioned that those changed. Were they changed? Can you give me an idea? Maybe PG&E, you could help also. How do they change? What's been the history of the change?
Sure. So there's a formula that's been established by the CPUC with parties weighing in on what that formula should be.
Yeah.
And the formula looks at the market price of power. It's called the market price referent each year at a certain point in the year. And then they look at what are the outstanding contract obligations that PG&E has in their portfolio for what length of time. And they look at what is the above market cost of power that PG&E has procured on the customer's behalf. And then that dollar amount is divvied up among all their customers, and the departing customers have to pay their share essentially of what that is. When a customer departs from PG&E's generation service, they are assigned a vintage year. So when I started getting my power from MCE, my vintage year was 2011. The exit fees that were established for that vintage year will impact the calculation that's done every year going forward. So the 2011 vintage is a little different than the 2012 vintage. But every year there's a new calculation. And just to give you a sense of movement, this year the exit fees are at the highest point that we've ever seen. And that is because the prices in the market are at a very low point. So there's always an inverse relationship. If the cost of power is going up, then there actually is not an above market cost, and the exit fee can drop to zero. Unfortunately, it can never go negative. We kind of disagree with that. But it can diminish. And right now it's at a rather high point, which is about $6.
And this is cost of power to PG&E?
Yes, and so these charges are paid to PG&E to reimburse them for their purchases.
Could I add one thing to that thought? Many factors go into the price of electricity going up. Some of it could be regulatory. Some of it just could be the nature of the utility itself. But one thing that all thermal generators need is some kind of fuel source. And so the price of gas will fluctuate, and the only real hedge you have against that sometimes is to go get one, or in some cases, maybe have a resource that doesn't need fuel, like solar or wind. So you lock it. So really what you have now is a fixed asset that doesn't need fuel. It will need some extra energy to balance itself out, but you don't run gas through that, so there's no variable cost there to worry about. So there's a lot of things that will affect the rates of PG&E. As far as the history of the rates going up, it's substantial. It's something I could provide later. I don't have it off the top of my head, but it's not small.
And then as a follow-up to that, if I may, so let's say PG&E bought a long-term contract, a 20-year contract, and basically you're paying for them because they had to buy that contract because you were a customer at one time, and now you're not a customer, so you're paying that. At the end of that 20-year contract, theoretically, then you don't have to pay that. But can't they distribute that? It's sort of like a credit card charge, only a certain portion used to go to the principal and the rest went to the interest until there was legislation that changed that. So what regulates how PG&E could, or any utility that would be affected by a CCA?
The CPUC regulates that. And
Okay.
there has been a proceeding on this very issue that took a couple of years, and what they came up with is probably going to be modified again. We're actually working on trying to make some changes to it right now.
Thanks.
Also, Donna, you were talking about energy efficient programs of $4.1 million and that they're funded through public purpose charges. Who pays the public purpose charges, and where do we see them?
All of us pay that. It's
And we pay that through,
our electricity bill.
and that's a PG&E charge, or?
It shows up on your PG&E bill if you're in PG&E service territory. If you're in Southern California Edison's service territory, it shows up on their bill, but it is a state-required charge, and it is collected and remitted to the state to then allocate as they see fit.
And so you get your portion of it, and that's what you then divvy out?
That's a great question. We do not get it. It's not divvied up in that way. The dollars are collected, and then the CPUC uses a lot of different factors to determine how to allocate those funds, and it's not tied to the amount that is provided by those specific customers. So PG&E customers aren't providing a set amount to PG&E, or MCE customers to MCE. In fact, the energy efficiency services that we provide are available to customers or non-customers, and the same is true with PG&E. So it's really up to the state. The CEC administers some of those funds, and the CPUC administers some of those funds. But they get to
California
decide.
Energy Commission, sorry, I let you get away with that. It was the California Energy Commission was actually the originator of that in the Warren-Alquist Act. And then the California Public Utilities Commission, I think in the 1996 Senator Peace legislation, got some of that. Is that correct?
Okay. So another question is, you're talking about the MCE PPAs and projects have created more than 1,300 California construction jobs. So I guess my question is, what type of labor? I thought you said union. So are you mandated to use union labor? Is it a choice? Is it non-union? PLAs? Answer that, that's my question.
Yeah, it's a choice, and it's something that we think is important. And just to give you a few examples, we have G2 Energy is providing landfill gas energy to us, waste to energy. They're using the plumbers and steam fitters. HVAC Local 228, the IBEW 1245 is providing labor for the Tridam project that we buy power from. EDF Renewables is developing a very large 30-megawatt solar project for us in Kern County, and that's through a contract with IBEW 1245. And I have a lot of other examples in this handout here, if that would be useful to you. We're also working, we have a sustainable workforce policy that's been approved by our board that really sets out some requirements for our different types of procurement. When we're buying power from a third party, we do ask them a lot of questions about the labor practices that they'll be using, and we think it's important both to look at multi-trade project labor agreements with multiple unions, not just one in favor of the other. But in addition to that, we also think it's important to allow for local businesses. And this is a practice that we've learned a lot about from the Sacramento Municipal Utility District. They're a local municipality run by local government, and they build a lot of projects, including a lot of renewable projects. And they have a nice balance, I think, of making sure that there's support for labor through multi-trade PLAs, but also support for local businesses, which is important to have. The other element that we've added in our jurisdiction is apprenticeship programs. We think that apprenticeship programs are really important, and pre-apprenticeship programs. Those tend to be needed, particularly in low-income communities where there aren't a lot of job opportunities. And so we work with Richmond Build and the Marin City Community Development Corporation to provide pre-apprenticeship job trainees and get them into some of the local projects that we're building. So those are some examples.
Okay. And you mentioned earlier, I believe, that Richmond has members on the board, Napa now has members on the board. If any other entity or City of Benicia, if we end up going this path, do we end up with somebody on the board?
There is one member per city and one member per county. So Richmond has one member on our board. The County of Napa now will have one member on our board. And we have, I think one thing that's worth pointing out when we talk about representation on the board is that our board members have a weighted vote that's tied to the load in their community. And so we have, if you're interested, we can provide you with kind of the breakdown of how that works from our Joint Powers Authority Agreement, our JPA agreement. But it means that our larger cities and towns have a little bit more weight to their vote if we were to get into a split vote situation. We actually haven't had one of those yet, so we haven't had to pull out the calculators, but there is a weight to the vote, and that would be the case with any new members that join at this time. There could be a point in the future where our board changes that policy to make some adjustments if our board becomes too unwieldy and there's a need to create some more streamlining. But our board has had some discussion about this and thought a lot about it and knows that there are entities like ABAG that have a very large number of representatives, and that doesn't seem to be a deterrent to moving, making good choices. So at this point, we're continuing with the policy that's been in place since the beginning, where there's one representative for each city or county that joins.
And so, if I could so the follow-on question to that would be, so does that mean that MCE is open-ended in growth?
I'm sorry, say that again?
Is MCE open-ended in your growth possibilities?
No. Well, I would say that we are not constrained from a legal or regulatory basis within the state of California, at least not currently. But our current policy is only to look at expansion within a small geographic region. And the first step in any consideration of expansion is really to look at internally if it makes sense for our staff resources and that sort of thing. We're actually coming to a point right now where we're going to be holding off on any future expansion for about a year. Because we have a lot of new communities that are just about to be added, and we really want to spend time doing a good job of incorporating those communities, doing the high level of outreach that we like to do. We had over 80 community meetings in Richmond when we were enrolling there in 2013. We want to make sure that we have some focused attention on the next batch of enrollments that would happen in February and May. And then we'd be looking to revisit and decide if we want to expand beyond that point or not.
Okay. So I forget whose presentation it was in, but the word liability came up. So what are the liabilities with CCAs?
Well, I think probably the ones that come to mind first are contractual liabilities, and those are liabilities that we spend a lot of time thinking about when we're entering into power purchase agreements, because those are really the biggest decisions that we make as far as allocating dollars of our ratepayers to purchasing power over sometimes a 20-year period. We like to enter into long-term power supply agreements. So it's really important to have those contracts well vetted with a lot of due diligence regarding the counterparties that we're entering into agreements with, and ensuring that there are more than adequate protections for our agency should the supplier fail to meet their obligations. I would say that that's probably the most important thing to keep in mind when we're protecting against liabilities. I think one thing that often comes up for new communities that are considering a CCA program is, for a community that's been around for a long time, you wonder if there will be any, if the debts and liabilities of this new activity will have any impact on the local government. And I think that what's important to point out there is that through the JPA structure, we have a firewall between the debts and liabilities of MCE and the debts and liabilities of the member agencies. That, of course, was very important to our founding cities and towns, and is a big part of our JPA agreement, and that is actually included in every single contract that we sign, just as a reminder to the counterparties. So that's a protection that's kind of built in. So I guess those are some examples, but if you have more specific questions, I can.
Well, okay, well, I'm wondering if anybody else on the panel has any thoughts on the liability side at all. Anybody? Seeing none, I'll go to my last question. Can you or somebody on the panel define for me, because you're doing a technical study, is that correct? What you're doing currently?
Yeah, what we did is not so much a technical study, it's really a membership analysis. So it's an analysis that's quantitative in nature that looks at the exact load, the historic load in Benicia, and then looks at the cost of power currently in the market, and runs an analysis to determine if we were to add this load to our existing jurisdiction, would we be having to raise rates to allow for that load to be added, or would we have a break-even or slightly reduced rates? So that really is the analysis that our board requires that we undertake before we consider adding a new member to our jurisdiction.
Okay, so now I understand Richmond did a risk assessment. So maybe somebody could describe for me what that is and why an entity may want to or not want to do a risk assessment.
Okay, there may be folks calling it something different. The study that we did for Richmond was very similar, though, as far as I think it may have been referred to as a risk assessment because it's really looking at what is the risk to MCE of adding a new community, and if it would cause a rate increase, then it was something our board would choose not to do.
So it's not a risk assessment that the entity does for the risks to the entity?
It's that actually, let's have staff respond to that because it was a separate third party
Yes,
assessment.
as I understand it, and I only briefly have looked at the information, the City of Richmond chose to do a separate risk assessment, and my understanding is they did a couple of them, one that focused on the risk assessment from a purely generation standpoint, and I'll ask staff to correct me on that, but it was very technical, and the other one was more on a qualitative standpoint relative to moderate, high, low risk, possibly that the city would be taking on as a result of going with a CCA program of sorts. So
Okay.
And
there may be others, but that's the one I'm familiar with.
Right, and that actually, if I can, that segues into one of my remaining questions. You asked most of mine. One of my remaining questions I have is that now we have some potential benefits from cap and trade revenues that go to the California Public Utilities Commission has some jurisdiction or authority over. So aren't they looking at distributing some of that revenue back to the user?
That is being done. Do you want me to comment on that?
Yeah, you can. I don't work in that department.
Okay, yeah. So every 6 months, and you probably, if you go back and look at your June or July bill, you'll see an extra line item that says, Justin might know what it's called, but you want to say what it's called on the bill? Sure, yeah, that's climate credit. That is the
What's
cap and trade
climate credit.
Climate credit.
So that is the way of returning the cap and trade revenues directly to the customer. So it shows up on all customers' bills throughout California, no matter who they're getting power from.
Okay, but that doesn't, okay, so anyway, so is there any, I don't know if you want to take a stab at it now or later, but pros, cons, risk assessment?
I have some questions, and I would like to follow up on that. That seemed a little dismissive, maybe I'm just not hearing it right, is that the reason, as I understand the logic behind the action of using the cap and trade revenues was for exactly this issue, among others, but it was one of the things that Turn advocated for. Am I correct on that? And so it was a very direct relationship, and it is significant, not substantial, but it is significant.
But you're talking about the money available to pay for these?
The money that's coming back to the ratepayer. Correct.
Okay, but that's not my question. My question is, Richmond did a third-party risk assessment. My question is, what are the reasons pro and con for doing a risk assessment? And you may not be able to answer it today, but I would like to have an answer at some point in the future.
I will state this point because it came to me after several months, and Alex finally beat into my head what a CCA is and how they work and that sort of thing. And what it comes down to, myself nor your staff are qualified to assess the pros and cons of joining a CCA. It's very technical. So the council will need to decide if you have sufficient information to make a decision to proceed. And you also we will need, not tonight, but when we come back to you with the MCE, and I apologize, I'm referring to the MCE report analysis they're doing, whether you need additional information. But my guess is, and I'm not going to I will turn it over to Dan, is Richmond, who did choose to go forward with MCE, did a lot of due diligence in that process. They were one of the first, I think, that did that. So they did a lot of due diligence, and it's been helpful to us because it's given us a better understanding. But I'll turn it over to Dan.
I would just add to that a copy of the executive summary of the risk assessment was part of your package. And it kind of sets forth what I liked about that was the types of risks that it identified, and not a quantification of risk, but at least it identified the kinds of issues and the kinds of things that we would want to think about before joining a CCA, and I think it set it out in a pretty clear manner. And I urge you to take a look at that in a little more detail, and if you, and again, the council may choose to want to look at independently. As the city manager has indicated, nobody on staff is going to have the expertise to do an evaluation of that type. So
thank you all very much, by the way.
So
Thank you.
Two things. One, I did misunderstand your question, and that was an excellent question. And then the second thing is that it has a sense of making sense, and so maybe what you would prepare is an estimate of time and money and who's available to do the kind of third-party review. And not that we're telling you to do it, just give us some parameters.
We can do that.
Okay, thanks. As I said, my remaining questions, that most of them have been asked, is I'm curious, let me see. Well, I did ask about the role of cap and trade in PUC, and I don't think there's any more to say about that, unless you want to. Is that? Okay. Then, in terms of we talked about the jobs and doing business locally. Is that an adopted policy by resolution and criteria?
It is an adopted policy. We can send it to you.
And then do you have performance measures for that?
Yeah, and it depends on, there are a couple of different categories that the policy applies to. So for our third-party contracts, there's a certain process that we follow when we do an RFP review, things that we ask the bidders to provide to us. So there's a different process for different types of activities that we engage in, but it's the policy explains that pretty well.
Okay. Then you've covered the net energy. So what does PG&E plan on charging for the proposed green option?
Yeah, pardon me. Yeah, right now, and again, this is proposed. We're still waiting for CPUC to give us the approval on it. The initial cost will likely start at about 3.5 cents a kilowatt hour, and it will diminish after that. But that's what the initial cost for customers are at this point, to be participating in that.
Okay. Then we were talking about the difference between an investor-owned utility and Sacramento Municipal Utility District, and there's also Palo Alto, which I understand is now a zero-carbon utility. So I assume that's a trend that's occurring?
I think the latter is a trend, just by the nature of California wanting to go green. But the investor-owned utility that's jurisdictional, we use words like jurisdictional and non-jurisdictional. If you're an investor-owned utility, you're jurisdictional. You're under the watchful eye of the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission and the state regulator, the CPUC. If you're non-jurisdictional, then you're someone like Sacramento, Western Area Power Authority, Los Angeles Water and Power. You're really an entity that is not technically under that watchful eye, but I don't think they want lawmakers being too upset about that, coming in and changing the laws. So they do play along. They pay close attention to what's going on. They try not to differentiate themselves more than they need to. But really they are under the control of the local elected officials, much like CCA would be under you.
Okay. And then my last question is for PG&E. How many contiguous counties are within the PG&E area of service?
I think I have it written down here. Hold on just a second. What's that? I may have to get the slide out again. Hold on, it was down there somewhere.
Do you think it's more than 3?
There's 49 counties.
49 counties?
That's
curious.
part of the service territory.
Okay, thanks. Let me call on the cards that we have in order. The first card I have is Andrea Soto. And I don't know if you missed the intro on this, but there's no decision being made tonight. This was a workshop.
Right. Good evening, Madam Mayor, members of the council. I'm Andres Soto. And I moved here last year from Richmond, and so we went through this whole struggle about whether or not to join MCE over there. And I can report to you that it's really been a good relationship. MCE as an organization really spent a lot of time reaching out into the community, holding a number of workshops to educate people as to what the program was, what their options were going to be in multiple languages, because that's required in a community like Richmond. And, you know, the relationship has even gotten enriched over time. I wasn't here for the full presentation, but one of the things we're really excited about is the partnership between the City of Richmond and MCE in taking our port, just like Benicia's port, where cars are imported, and you have these massive parking lots. And they're going to become solar farms while they, a solar farm, while it provides shade for the automobiles that right now are sitting out in the sun. This is all going to go back into the local grid, and that's going to help, you know, the local ratepayers. We've seen, despite predictions to the contrary, that because it's an opt-in type of program, there was not some kind of massive opting out, even though there was a campaign to try to undermine some of the sentiment of people in the community. And that just turned out not to be the case. People are very satisfied with the service they're being provided, and when they find out that they're actually participating in helping to develop the renewable economy, they're glad to do their part, even though, you know, it's just one small part of the equation. And, you know, the other thing is that in this recent struggle around the permit for the Chevron refinery, it was the community that pushed the refinery to consider partial solarization of their energy development, and now MCE is going to be leasing land in what used to be evaporation ponds in the refinery, and are going to be providing, I forget the exact number of megawatts, I think it was 2 megawatts at a minimum of electricity for the refinery. And so these are all some of the things that are possible with having a group like MCE, where you would have a seat at the table, unlike PG&E, which is beholden to its ratepayers. And the imperative to provide profits to those ratepayers led to situations like the San Bruno fire, where we saw essentially corruption between PG&E and the CPUC, the executive leadership of both groups, with their cozy relationship, having the leadership of the CPUC communicating to the leadership of PG&E on how to evade regulation, how to evade the fines. And then we saw last week where, despite the recommendation of a $2.4 billion penalty, the CPUC cut it in half to 1.2. So, you know, we have to understand we're dealing with big, powerful entities when you're dealing with PG&E, and here's a chance for you to have some local control, some local decision-making power over a utility in your community. It seems like a no-brainer. And, you know, I think we also need to remind ourselves that looking at that pie chart that PG&E provided, you know, their energy is still coming from nuclear. And while it may be carbon-free, it's certainly not risk-free. You know, we're an earthquake country, as we were recently reminded. And, you know, they want to use ratepayers in order to cover the costs of decommissioning. They want to use ratepayers to cover the costs of paying the penalties for the San Bruno fire. And that's, you know, not really fair to the ratepayers, and that's not the direction we should be moving in. I think Benicia ought to jump on board with this, join the other communities that are now having a really good relationship with MCE and moving in the direction of CCA as a way to decentralize and localize energy generation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions for Mr. Soto?
Mayor?
Mr. Kilcher?
Yeah, all due respect to the speaker, I have to say it was not our intent to vilify PG&E at this meeting, and it is clear that they are still a partner in this. We are not leaving PG&E. We are choosing who will purchase our power and where it comes from. So I just would like to make it clear.
Right. I was actually going to address
Thank you,
that.
Mayor.
Is that I appreciate
and it's not my attempt to vilify them. I just want to put on the public record what we know.
It's not a dialogue, Mr. Soto. Thank you. But I do want to say that I appreciated the tone and that it's a partnership and that working together we'll all benefit. And I think that for this area, that's what we really want to continue with. The next card I have is for Mr. Bob Livesay. Did I say that correctly?
Close. Feel like a lone wolf. I think I'm outnumbered, but that's okay. I can hold my own, hopefully. I don't concern myself on this particular issue with emotions, not agenda-driven on it, nor anything like that. I'm more concerned about the consumer. And I think the consumer in the city, in our city, not worried about any other city, is very, very important. And when I see something like an opt-out, that bothers me, because I do believe that the last bill that was trying to go through, it did die and it didn't make it, but it will come back. And I do believe that if I was to ask the question to MCE, probably very happy that bill didn't go through, and I understand that. But when you have a situation where you possibly have in this city 13,500, if I'm not mistaken, customers with PG&E, I think that's close. And the opt-out situation in Richmond was around 15%. And the 100%, and that can be verified, and the 100% was around 2%. So it looks to me like you've got 98% which are at 50%, or you might say they were defaulted into that, because I don't think there's any way of tracking to find out actually if they said, well, we really don't want to be in it. And there was a survey taken, and I know that some people would not agree with the survey, but 75% of the people in Richmond didn't even know they were an MCE, and I do believe that MCE probably wouldn't agree with that survey. But what's even more important, that only 25% knew they were with an MCE. So that's sort of bothersome to me, that I think that the consumer is very important. And the other thing that bothers me is we say that we can sign up for 100%, or we can sign up for 50%, or we can stay with PG&E. And PG&E gentleman stole some of my thunder, because I had those numbers, 27%, et cetera, 22%. And at the particular rate that you're trending, it looks to me that not only by 2020 will you meet your 33% of renewable energy, but you're going to be in the neighborhood of over 50% or close to it. So at that point, by 2020, you're going to be in the grid at 50% for renewable energy. The MCE or a CCA is now saying that, excuse me, if 98% of their people are in at the, and I think that figure's close, at the 50%, all of a sudden, there's no need for it, or it's not necessary, or the bar is going to be raised, because eventually, I guess, we want to get to 100%. And the other thing that bothers me is there any facts? Because I believe in facts. I just like simple solutions, simple answers. Are there any facts that says that if I sign up for 100% or 50%, can you track that electron and actually tell me that to my house, and I think there was a statement made earlier, can you go down there and push that red button and say, oh yeah, Bob, he's in for 100%, it's going to go directly to his house. Or the other guys on the street are in for 50% and they're getting it, and the other people are at PG&E. It can't be tracked. So therefore, there are no facts to prove that they are actually getting that energy. Now, I don't believe that they market in that manner. I think what they market is the fact that we will buy on your behalf. And is that a correct statement or a fair statement?
So you need to go through the chair, and what I'm going to do is ask...
I'm sorry, say it again.
You need to ask your question through the chair, that's me, and then what I'm going to do...
I understand that the monitor was over here.
No, I'm the presiding officer, so you're going to go through the chair, and what I'm going to ask is that when the rest of the public has commented or asked questions, then we're going to have the panel respond in the interest of time. So your time is up.
Well, that's quite all right. I'll obey the rules, but that's not how I understood it was going to be. And I've had an email to that event that I could make the comments and I didn't have to go through the chair.
Well, that's fine, but that's not my understanding of how to run the meeting, and we'll straighten it out after the meeting if you're available.
Fine. But anyhow, I'll go through you. That's fine.
I'm sorry, your time is up now, please.
I also understood there was no time. Sorry, can I come back again, or does I only have one time?
No, we're going to do the 5 minutes. We're running out of time. We have a closed session that we're scheduled for, so...
So I'm through.
Yeah,
yes, but, keep in mind that we will have other hearings on this. This is not, and you can also submit your questions in writing, and we will have all of that recorded as in writing to the council.
Mayor?
Yes.
In fairness, Mr. Livesay, he and some other individuals did contact staff. We were trying to put together what format we would use. Given that it was a study session, we didn't know how much time the council was going to have. In fairness, we've not had a study session for many months because we've had other work to do. And so staff did give the indication, because I know it was has been your intent to not have such a formal situation where there could be a dialogue going back and forth, and I know that's your intent. So Mr. Livesay is correct. He and some others were given the impression there'd be more time to speak and such. So if anything, that's staff's responsibility for giving that impression.
Right. So I did indicate that we wanted to be less formal than a council meeting. I'm a little concerned about time. What I'd like to do is that your question has been noted, and then at the end of all the public comment, we're going to ask for the panel to answer those questions. All right? And I had no idea what staff was telling you, so I'm sorry that we had crossed messages.
Well, I had numerous emails, and it was confirmed that it was going to be that way, and it was going to go through the monitor, and now I come up here and I find out it's not done that way. It's very disappointing, and I think it's not what I expected, and I really don't appreciate it.
Well, you can talk to staff about that. Could I have Pat Toth-Smith, is that correct? She left. Constance Butel.
Thank you. Couple questions, but to start off with, I am a retiree of Pacific Bell, and after 30 years being in a highly regulated utility, we did go through something called divestiture. And I want you to know it's been very successful. Apple has just announced another iPhone app and a series of products. So I know that the energy utility will survive CCAs and other kind of innovations. But I do have a question for virtually each of the panelists. For Mr. McGuire, you had indicated that there had been some informal complaints, which I had assumed was related to either CCA in general or Marine Clean Energy, and that would be interesting, I think, for us to know about. And for Mr. Delaney, this may be the obvious, but today PG&E doesn't produce all the energy on the grid. I'm pretty, and so that would be just another form of mix with solar energy coming or renewable energy coming from MCE. For Ms. Ninau, Benicia, in joining a CCA, you had indicated that somebody needed to watch the regulatory.
Yeah, Ms. Butel, through the chair, please.
Oh, I'm sorry. Just wanted to make sure I was directing. This would be for Ms. Ninau for the Center for Sustainable Energy. She had indicated that Benicia, in joining a CCA, would need to keep an eye on regulatory issues. Would that be true in that we're not becoming a CCA, we're joining a CCA? To Mr. Horak at PG&E, again, it's on the green bundle option. I know it's not operational now, but when would the scheduled date for that be? And then is 6%, I've read in many articles about energy cost increases, is about an average of 6% per year. And if that is about the right percentage for increase for customers, and looking at Ms. Weiss's MCE data for the average person spending about $85 a year in energy, or $85 a month in energy costs, I would see that cost at a 6% raise going from $85 or $86 up to about $124 over a 10-year period. So just to kind of hold that in mind as to budgeting forward. And then finally, for Marine Clean Energy, the City of Benicia has some major solar sites and producing energy, and would these be tied into the net metering possibility? And then I noted renewable energy projects in the communities you serve. Would this be possible for Benicia over time? Thank you.
Okay, so we have a slew of questions. I would like to start with Mr. Livesey's first question, which I'm sorry. I ran through the cards and then I forgot to say, is there more public comment? Okay, that's okay. You don't have to put a card in.
Kathy Carriage. I wanted to ask just a couple of questions about the rates to individual ratepayers. Right now there's a tiered system. I know PG&E, I don't know what the status is at the PUC, but there's been an attempt by PG&E to get rid of that tiered system. I wanted to know what the rate paying tier structure was for the individual consumer. Is that a tiered where the less you use, the less you paid? I have a question about, as time goes on, do you anticipate the exit fees will be reduced? I think you may have answered that, but I'm not quite sure. I also want to know if there's an anticipation in the future, as you have a more stable renewable power source, that the cost of energy will be reduced over time, or at least not fluctuate and go up as much. I had a couple comments to make just about the fact that my ears really perked up when you said that it's 27% less for a CCA because of their nonprofit status to develop, or maybe it's 27% higher for PG&E to develop infrastructure projects, basically the renewable energy projects. And I think that's a huge advantage to going with the CCA. I wanted to speak just briefly on consumer choice. I think one of the best things about CCA is that I will have a choice. I was never asked whether I could opt in or out of PG&E. I was never given an opportunity to opt out. And now, for the first time in years, because I think long ago there was a choice, first time in years, I will actually have a choice which I haven't had for years and years and years. So it's very nice to worry about being able to, whether you should have to opt in, but the fact is we have had nothing that we could opt in or opt out of before. And I really think one of the big things about our way of life is that our government functions best when we have competition. And we haven't had that a while in the utility industry.
Mr. Livesay,
Thank you.
are you going to be here for the answers to your questions? I'm sorry. I saw that. I hope that you're going to be here for the answers to your questions. Yes. Well, as soon as I finish hearing from the rest of the public. And Ms. Carriage, you weren't done, so I didn't mean to cut you off. Okay. We're going to ask the panelists to answer them, yes. So anybody else wishing to address or to come forward with public comments or questions about this CCA?
It's not too long. John Van Lanschut. Two quick things. This whole thing about climate change, it's a reactive thing or a proactive thing. And I think over the last maybe 50 years, we've been reacting. We've been asking people not to water their lawns or use a lot of electricity, or PG&E gives you a rebate if in the wintertime you turn the energy down to 58 or 68. In the sea level rise committee we had, and then the committee I was on with the waterfront, part of that is, the sea level is going to rise, and we got to, when we take that in consideration, when we make the waterfront down at the end of First Street, they ask people in town to, like your signs, use 20% more water. All of that's reactive. It's not getting at the real issue, which is we're putting a ton of carbon every day, tons and tons of carbon every day into the atmosphere. And the only way to stop that is to stop taking the carbon out of the ground, whether it's oil or coal, and throwing it back in the air. When people did that a few million years ago, a lot of people went extinct, and so did animals. And the only way to do that is to get on the bandwagon for renewables. The city has got solar panels all over the place. The school system is doing some stuff. There's more bikes, EV vehicles. Japanese Toyota's coming out with the double carbon battery. It's supposed to be really light and really small in their 16 models. It's got a mileage of about 400 miles, and it takes about 20 minutes to charge up. They say you can go have a Starbucks and your car will be charged again. All of that is the proactive part. And I just see this CCA, which, funny name, but I'll buy it. And like Kathy said about the opt-out, give people choices. I mean, I don't have a beef against PG&E. We don't use a lot of electricity or gas or anything. But we get a lot of their stuff from them is from the ground, and I'd like us to stop doing that. So I'm very much in favor of. And I don't see a problem. The only question I would have is, has any of these CCAs failed? And from my understanding and research, little as I did on the internet, they haven't. So I'm for this. I hope you vote for this. And one last thing. I think Mr. Livesay or somebody else said that there hasn't been a lot of outreach, and you can sort of tell there's not a lot of people here today. That could be for a lot of different reasons. There's some school stuff happening. I would like to see us, and maybe the newspaper, have more of these, and also hopefully MCA will go like they did in the other towns, not door to door, but at least tell people, hey, this is what's happening. And I think you'll get people buy-in. The unknown is what people fear. Once they know, they'll decide one way or the other. Thank you very much.
Okay, so I think I heard a question in there is the outreach, and we'll just have a brief answer on that. Anybody else wishing to raise a question or make a comment about the presentations tonight? Go ahead.
It may have been, I just have a question, and if we do move forward and we make this partnership or we get into a relationship with MCE, CCA, how long is the relationship? You know, we have a board member, but is this a duration that lasts a certain amount of time as citizens of Benicia? I guess I just have that question.
Excellent. Anybody else? Okay. So we're going to ask the panelists to address the questions. I hope you're all writing those down. Let me take a crack at the first one, only the first one, and that is because I've been thinking about this idea, the original question that was asked by Vice Mayor Campbell and then followed up by his neighbor, Mr. Livesay, is that, so the molecules of energy aren't colored. And it's kind of like we are a contractor with the State Water Project, and that comes out of the Sacramento River. And those molecules of water for the contract aren't colored either. So there's water in the river. We get some of that water out of the river, but it's not, it's the Sacramento River water. And the energy is just like that. So it's a source of energy, but then you have to do the audits. And Department of Water Resources then says this amount of water was delivered to this contractor and this is what you owe. And they have to true it up. Takes years, as I understand it, and we complain about the cost, but that's the way it is. Is that a fair explanation of the distribution of energy?
Yes. You know, we have meters everywhere. So we know how much is being put in the system and we know how much is taken off. We can also tie those contracts with the people who took on the obligation to receive those. Adams follow the path of least resistance. It's very much like water. And so I think your analogy is right. Water is a good example. Another one is looking at an elevator grain. You know, electrons are fungible to a certain extent, but we actually do tie those to the people who are producing those. The ISO clears as much as, you know, billions of dollars of transactions every month, and we bill them. Just that way. We have very sophisticated systems, and so there is proof that what electrons are going in the system, where they come from, and who they're tied to. The fact that they don't necessarily go to an individual's house, well, that doesn't happen today with PG&E either. It's the law of physics. It's not the law of necessarily anything else.
Okay, so I know that you're all professionals, and so I think you were writing the questions that were attributed to you. And then also, if any of the other panelists want to comment, I do ask that you kind of recognize it's getting late, and we have a closed session that we have to adjourn to. So, Ms. Netto, do you want to start off by answering any of the questions that you thought pertain to you, and any other comments?
Sure. I believe your question was...
And you have to lean into the microphone.
Okay. I believe your question was related to whether or not the city would need to have someone on staff to monitor regulatory proceedings at the CPUC. When I developed the presentation, I developed it kind of from the view of whether or not the city would be an individual CCA or would join with, for example, MCE. And MCE is very active at the California Public Utilities Commission, and I believe that they would likely handle that regulatory relations.
Any other questions for you? Why don't we just go down the panelists and you can just bundle your questions and answers. Was that anything else, Ms. Netto?
I believe that was the only one.
Okay.
Okay. The first question I'm going to respond to was from Mr. Lipsay regarding kind of proof of the amount of energy that we buy that goes to our customers. And I'm going to ask Justin or Alex, if y'all are still out there, to pull out the cost comparisons that we bought. This is a postcard that we jointly produce with PG&E once a year and mail out to all the customers throughout our jurisdiction, whether they're with PG&E or MCE. And this shows feel free to grab one if you want on the way out. This shows what power we're buying. It's reported to the California Energy Commission. PG&E also reports their power purchases, and it's shown in megawatt hours of purchase for the year. That postcard also shows the cost comparison that we all agree to, and it shows the greenhouse gas emissions difference for the two agencies. So there's some proof right there, and that is all third-party certified information and provided by both parties. So that should be helpful. The second question I'll respond to, does Benicia, you covered that one. Net energy metering projects or local solar installations that already exist in Benicia, would they become MCEs? And the answer is yes. If a customer with an existing net energy metering project, which also means a solar on your rooftop, for example, if you choose to stay with MCE, you will automatically become a MCE NEMS customer. There's no extra application to fill out or anything like that. So it's an automatic process. You can also choose to stay with PG&E, and it'll continue to operate the way it does today. Not a big difference. The next question is, could renewable projects in Benicia get built if Benicia joined MCE? The answer is yes. We have a feed-in tariff that pays a fixed above-market price over a 20-year term for any developer or landowner that wants to build generation for us. When we expanded to Richmond, the feed-in tariff became available in Richmond, and the same would be true for Benicia, for anyone that wants to develop a project and sell it to us. There was a question about tiered rates, and others may want to comment on this, but I'll briefly say that the tiering effect that shows up on the bill that makes your bill go higher the more you use, that is on the transmission and distribution side of your bill. It is not impacted by generation currently. That has changed since we began serving customers, but currently that tiering effect really doesn't change whether you're an MCE customer or a PG&E customer, because it's all on the transmission and distribution side of the bill. The next question was, over time, will costs fluctuate less, considering the supply choices that MCE makes? I believe the answer is yes. We intentionally work to get more renewables into our portfolio because that helps to stabilize costs over time. It ensures that we don't have to be subject to ongoing fluctuations in the fossil fuel market. We can unhook from those fluctuations by buying into renewable energy facilities where the fuel source is typically free. The sun and the wind, thankfully, are, and we just have fixed management costs that are pretty low. So we believe that over time we will be able to help stabilize costs. And then there were two last questions that I have here related to process and outreach and length of relationship. So when a new community joins MCE, they become a member, and their customers become a part of MCE service territory, and there's not really a point in time where that goes backwards. We do have a provision in our governing document that allows a city to remove themselves from the board if they choose to not sit on the board anymore, but it's not really practical for them to remove the customers, or else they would have to figure out a way to cover the costs of removing those customers. So that's not really a scenario that a city or town contemplates when they join. It's a relationship that's kind of an ongoing relationship. As far as the process, though, what would happen next for the City of Benicia, assuming that the membership study comes back looking positive. I've actually seen the final draft, and it does look very positive, so you all should be getting that very soon. But after that is completed, then the City of Benicia has the ability to pass an ordinance to join the MCE program. After that ordinance is approved, then MCE would be able to undertake a procurement for the customers. That takes a few months, and then we would, ideally, what we like to do is enroll customers, do the procurement and the enrollment at one time, particularly when there are small communities doing this at one time. So what might be a potential time frame for Benicia is allowing for customer enrollment in May. That would allow for outreach and workshops to begin occurring later this year, early next year. We would be showing up at farmers markets, community events, homeowners associations, chambers of commerce, anything that you all recommend. We would be showing up to start talking about the program early before enrollment. There would be enrollment notices that would start being mailed out to customers 3 months prior to the enrollment month. During the enrollment month, customers would be switched over on the day of their meter read, and then there would be 2 additional notices that go out the following 2 months after that. The enrollment notices explain MCE, give folks the option of opting out through a website or a phone number, which is live 24/7 during the entirety of the 5-month enrollment period. And or customers can opt up if they choose the deep green option during that time. If folks don't see their mailers for whatever reason, they can always opt out later anytime. There's never a time you can't opt out. Those notices are sent, a couple of them are in the form of a large postcard, a couple of them are in the form of a letter. Some folks aren't as inclined to read a postcard as a letter, so we do some of both. And lots and lots and lots of outreach, and did I mention some more outreach? And that's it for the questions I had down.
So exit fees going down?
I don't expect them to go any higher. So that would be my expectation, but we won't know until January of next year.
And then I think it was you, Mr. Delaney, talked about the 27% less.
Yeah, it actually ranges anywhere between 18 and 25%, and it's purely an issue of cost of capital. Municipalities or CCAs can use 100% debt financing rather than equity and debt. It's not a for-profit entity, so there's no shareholders to feed, and there are several other reasons as well. So their cost of capital just turns out better. So they come out with the same product but ahead by that percentage. It's just how the numbers work.
Okay, and our good partner, Mr. Hurok?
I think I only had one question, but in a lot of time, if there's other questions for anybody out there who want to have a discussion afterwards, I'm certainly be around for availability. I think the one question that came to me was about a green option and when that is going to be out. And if I knew, I would certainly tell you. The CPUC has its mysterious ways. No offense. Has mysterious ways, and if you can predict it, we'll maybe go to Vegas because we win a lot there.
Remember who you're sitting next to.
I know. I put it over on him.
All right.
Well, as you can see, I am one person. I'm not five commissioners who consist of the CPUC, and they vote on these things. But I did work some on that green tariff case, and I know it's past due. We were supposed to have a proposed decision out July 1st, and I think the judge is retired and passed it on to another judge. So I don't know, but it should be forthcoming soon.
I won't hold it against you.
Yeah. So I had a few questions. One was about complaints against. I think maybe the question misinterpreted what I said or maybe I misspoke. But the complaint process in the Code of Conduct is against these guys, the IOUs, made by the CCAs, and not the other way around, or may say a consumer against the CCA. So I don't really have anything juicy to report on that end. Some of the issues that do come up relate to data access, billing, sometimes marketing, but like I said, we've been able to informally resolve most of those without any penalties or anything coming out of that. And then there was a question of whether or not any CCAs have failed. So far, I think the answer is no. We have Sonoma Clean Power Authority and Marin Clean Energy, which are both operating and doing so successfully. We also do, though, have two CCAs that the CPUC has approved, which never got started. So that was the San Joaquin Valley Power Authority and Clean Power SF, Clean Power San Francisco. And I don't know much about the San Joaquin. Maybe Don does, but Clean Power SF got stalled in San Francisco Public Utilities Commission for political reasons. It never got off the ground so far. And right now at the CPUC, we're also reviewing the implementation plan of Lancaster Community Choice Aggregation in Lancaster, California, which, when and if they get started, will be the first CCA in Southern California Edison's territory. And just to try to help explain about the electrons, equaling electrons discussion we've had a little bit, I sort of think of it as yes, electrons are electrons, but say if Benicia joined a CCA and then they decided to build a solar array here on behalf of their customers, those are new solar electrons replacing presumably other dirtier electrons that wouldn't have existed but for joining that CCA and creating the solar panel, if that's helpful at all. So
it is.
Okay.
Thanks. All right, Mr. Lane, you have the last word and brief.
Mayor Patterson, forgive me, I didn't write the questions down, but I do remember some of the significant ones, so I'll try this. But to the extent that I did not answer them, or people have more, I'll be outside, and I'm happy to do that. We did talk about electrons and how they flow and they're used in the system, and they are associated with people. They don't necessarily flow to the house. It'd be easier if it was, but that's how telephones work, not necessarily how electrons work. I wish I could find a way to manage the physics of the system that way. I just haven't figured out how to do that yet. But the truth is, it does get into the idea of who can inject into the system and who can take off. And that injection into the system of whether it be a coal plant or a nuclear plant or a solar plant, that's what we measure with the meters, and we do associate that with individuals. You brought up an issue of opt-out versus opt-in. I'm very sensitive to that. I understand where you're coming from on that. I don't want that to go away. I want to acknowledge that comment of yours because you are trying to think of ratepayers, as you say. Let me give you at least my personal experience on that. CCA really is not a new theory. It was implemented in Ohio, and it's been wildly successful in Ohio, so it's not a theory. It was brought here from that place. To the extent that, how would I put this? And I mean this with all the respect possible for PG&E. You'll never elect the CEO of PG&E, ever. The way you become the CEO of a large utility is you're put there by the board. The board does that. You will never elect a board of a major utility, investor-owned utility. You will not elect or have any audience with the CEO of a large investor-owned utility. But when you have municipalities that are all over the place, the accountability is a lot closer to the people that live there because you elect them and you can unelect them. I don't mean to scare the council by saying that, but it is closer to home. And what you're going to find is you're going to have solutions that are more meaningful to people that are in that footprint than necessarily a one-size-meets-all. So the opt-out, I understand where you're coming from, but it makes the CCAs feasible. And the key really is making sure that there's enough notice put out there where people understand it's coming. And I do, unless the law has changed, I'd have to look to Don or others to do this, but there is a requirement that they put out two notices, two kinds of notices through your bills, and that there has to be community outreach. Can it be better? I suppose, but I just want to make sure that I understood that I heard you, and I wanted to respond to that. And again, if there were any other questions, for time's sake, I should stop. And if there's any other questions, I'll be outside. I'm happy to help.
That's terrific. So I want to thank all the panelists very much. I know that some of you came from a great distance. You were very comprehensive, answered the questions. I want to thank the audience for your patience. You sat through a lot. You had excellent questions, everybody. I really appreciated all of your questions. And we'll decide if we need to have another study session. My sense is that we don't, but let's have staff kind of do a debriefing, and we'll keep you posted. So again, I want to thank you very, very much. It was an excellent evening. And did you get your question answered? Okay. So, again, thank you. And we are now going to adjourn into closed session. We will report out on that closed session at the next meeting. And we're going to take a 5-minute break here. Thank you very much.